Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty and waived his right to appear in court. That's the gist of that story. We'll see what the developments are moving forward. We'll talk a little bit about it. But the big news now is that Proud Boys are being sentenced, and Joe Biggs just got sentenced to 17 years already on top of the 2.5 years he's already been in prison. And the reason this is so shocking was a couple of reasons. One, far left extremists who burn down police stations get less time. They get direct support from Democrats. They win millions of dollars in lawsuits. But if you are a right winger like Joe Biggs and you tear down a fence, they got you. Now, there's tons of people posting photos from the occupations, the autonomous zones, far left extremists firebombing federal buildings. And where are the criminal charges for any of these people? And the ones that have got caught, like the guy in Minneapolis burning down the police station, 4 years. Something doesn't make sense. Here's the other component of the story. The judge actually told him, if you've got a problem with an election, then you can speak out, make phone calls, file lawsuits, contact election officials, but you can't get violent. That's funny. Donald Trump is being criminally charged. His lawyers are being criminally charged. Members of the Trump administration have been criminally charged for literally speaking out, filing lawsuits, and contacting election officials. In fact, they've actually criminally charged the election officials over this. So the system may, in fact, be quite a bit broken. We'll talk about that, plus a bunch of other political stories. It's getting interesting out there. We've got a Ron DeSantis super PAC shutting down another large super PAC, ceasing door-knocking operations. And this is has many people wondering what's to come for the Tennessee campaign. Before we get started, my friends, head over to Timcast.com, click join us, become a member, because we're going to have a members-only uncensored show coming up for you tonight at 10 p.m. You don't want to miss it. As members, you can actually submit questions and potentially call into the show to talk to us and our guest. We do 5 callers, about 5 every night, and it could be you, but you have to sign up for at least 6 months or sign up today at the $25 per month level. If you sign up right now, you'll have an opportunity to enter the Discord, submit your questions, and it's good fun. But also, you'll notice Timcast.com, this button right here, it says Timcast IRL X Miami. That's right. We have 666 tickets remaining. They're going fast. This went live just about a week ago, and we've sold just around 175 tickets. So they're starting to pick up steam. But we'll see. Get them while you still can, because we will likely sell out. The event is October 6th from 6 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. We've got Patrick Bet David, Donald Trump Jr., Matt Gaetz, with me, Luke Rukowski, and Ian Carlson. Of course, it's going to be a very fun show. We got a pre-show, we got an after show, and we really hope to see you down there in Miami. So again, timcast.com. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, because word of mouth is really how we've gotten to the point where we are. Just the only marketing we've really done is those Times Square ads, which I don't actually know if those translate to people actually watching a show. It was more of like a prestige thing, like, haha, we've done it. But in terms of people watching the show, it's because you guys post it on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you can, and help support the show. And also, a lot of people have been posting clips from the show and getting paid on X. And for that, I say, please do that. Please absolutely do that. We've had a bunch of people be like, oh, I made a couple $100 this month. I was just posting clips from Timcast. I'm like, yes, please do more. That means we get free advertising and y'all get paid. I'm totally fine with that. Have fun. Joining us tonight to talk about this and a whole lot more is Adam Coleman.
Thank you for having me.
Who are you?
I'm Adam Coleman. I'm the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, which is an outlet where we advocate for people to speak freely, submit articles, especially opinion articles. We just got into journalism as well. I'm also the author of the book behind me, Black Victim and Black Victor, which talks about race, but other important things like family is really important these days, especially. And I'm also the columnist for Human Events and a frequent contributor to the New York Post.
Right on. Well, thanks for hanging out. Should be fun.
Thank you.
Hannah Claire Bermelow's hanging out.
Hey, I'm Hannah Claire. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. I'm happy to be back, and I'm excited for this conversation. Ian's here too, of course.
Hi, everyone. Ian Crosslin. Get your cast brew. If you haven't been to castbrew.com yet tonight, check it out and get yourself a bag. I had some of that. Which one was it yesterday? It was the, not Appalachian Nights.
Roberto Jr.?
No. What's another?
Stand Your Grounds?
It was Stand Your Grounds. We were shooting another commercial, and that was our prop coffee, and man, it is good.
The Rise with Roberto Jr. is the best selling.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like, well, we got to sell the other coffee, but everybody wants the Roberto Jr. Probably because he's on the bag.
I'm pulling for pumpkin spice, so don't let me down.
There's Mr. Bocus. He doesn't have the pull that Roberto Jr. has. Rest in peace.
Yeah, Bocus blend.
Yeah, we got Kellen pressing the buttons.
That's right. Another day with me pushing buttons. My name is Kellen, and I feel like coffee is something that a lot of people buy when it gets cold, right? It's so hot. We're in the dog days of summer right now. Once it gets cold, that Mr. Bocas pumpkin spice, I know it's going to take off.
We
Yeah.
beat Starbucks to the punch.
Seriously.
We got the Mr. Bocas pumpkin spice experience.
And
available now.
Dunkin's.
So good.
That's right. And we're going to have it forever.
Yeah, you got to get it now before anyone else. Otherwise,
Well,
it's out.
let's talk about news instead of coffee. Let's just jump into the first story. Here we go from the Daily Mail. Former Proud Boys leader Joe Biggs sobs during sentencing as he's given 17 years in prison over January 6th after begging court not to separate him from his daughter and cancer-stricken mom. Biggs, Ethan Nordine, Zachary Rail, and Enrique Tarrio were all found guilty of the charges after they broke into the Capitol following the 2020 election. Full stop! Fake news! Enrique Tarrio was actually not there. So, his charges, I don't believe anything to do with him. He was arrested beforehand and barred from the city. Tarrio was not there, so you gotta correct that one, Daily Mail. The judge ruled Biggs was qualified for a terrorism sentencing enhancement. Biggs' sentence is one of the harshest handed out in Capitol riot cases, only behind the 18-year sentence for Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes. Here's where it gets interesting. So this is Joe Biggs. Many of you may know him. He worked for InfoWars. He said, "I know that I have to be punished, and I understand." But he added, "Please give me the chance, I beg you, to take my daughter to school and pick her up. I wanted to see what would happen. My curiosity got the best of me. I am not a terrorist. I'm one of the nicest people in the world." Judge Timothy Kelly wasn't having it, as he said Americans are the envy of the world and U.S. elections must be respected, telling Biggs, "You did play a role in riling up the crowd. If you don't like how an election is being conducted, you can speak out, call, write, or meet with election officials. You can engage in peaceful protest, file a lawsuit." That right there is why I think we absolutely have to talk about this story, because that judge lied. Or he's really dumb. Maybe both. If you peacefully protest, like the people who were walking around the other side of the building, they're going to arrest you anyway. If you say sit in front of an abortion clinic, they're going to try to give you 11 years in prison because you peacefully protested. How about this? If you speak out on Twitter, they'll claim it's part of a criminal conspiracy. If you make a phone call, part of a criminal conspiracy. Write or meet with election officials. Not only are they charging Donald Trump, his staff, and legal team for doing these things, they've even criminally charged the election officials that they met with. So this is insanity. 17 years. Why? What did he do? He tore a fence down. Should he have done it? No. Should he have been punished or prosecuted or whatever? Yeah. 2.5 years, maybe a little harsh for tearing down a fence. You take a look at what happened with the far left extremists, BLM or otherwise, nothing. So this is particularly extreme. We have some commentary here. Matt Walsh says, "A man just got 17 years in prison for tearing down a fence on January 6th. Meanwhile, a guy responsible for burning an entire police station to the ground during the BLM riots got only 4 years. No sane person thinks this is justice. But we do not live in a sane world. It is an insane world." And of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out saying, Proud Boys organizer Joseph Biggs sentenced to 17 years by U.S. District Judge Timothy Kelly. How many violent BLM riders are serving 17 years? Especially after rotting in jail for the past 2 years, J6ers need to be pardoned. They've been persecuted enough. I have, this is the kind of thing that gives me a sinking feeling, because what I did following the story is I went to look at a few forums to see what the sentiment was among Trump supporters and fans of Joe Biggs. And, it's getting scary out there, because the response from these people is terrifyingly, as I've predicted, the view that the government is illegitimate, law enforcement doesn't exist, and the perception among those who support Donald Trump is increasingly becoming, and for many already is, that these law enforcement officers are no different than a guy in a clown costume. That if a person walks up to you wearing a set of clothes, it doesn't mean anything. They're now saying that this is Soviet-style communist revolution. This is what was happening in the Spanish Civil War. And if this escalates, and likely will, because the far left will not stop, they're going insane. I don't know if they're a zombie horde setting fire to everything around them, just screeching at the top of their lungs, or it's intentional. But you want to know who's at fault for the continued strife in this country? It's not Joe Biggs. It's this judge. 17 years, that's going to freak people out, and not the way they think. Now, here's what I want to add before we just jump into the full conversation. The reason why they gave him 17 years, it has nothing to do with who Joe Biggs is or what he did. It's because of the mob phenomenon. And they want everyone to know that they will throw the book at you and the hammer if you engage in any kind of mob mentality phenomenon. That is to say, often what we see in these riots with the far left, you have a mob of people walking around clueless. One guy will walk up to a door at a store and jiggle the handle and then run away. Another guy will run up within a split second as he's running away and grab the handle and pull the door open. Someone else will see the door being opened and they'll peek their head in. Someone behind him will shove him in. Then people see people going in the building and they all start rushing the building. There was no immediate action where an individual thought to themselves, we should storm this building. And that's what happens with Joe Biggs. He's just there. He has no idea what's going on. Despite the fact that they say that there's communications by the Proud Boys. Yeah, they were saying like, what are we doing? What's going on? He's there. People start taking action and he goes along with it. So they're basically setting an example. We don't care who you are. We don't care what you've done. If you are in the mob, you're going down. And that's why the people who did not get violent and had no idea what was happening on the other side of the building are being criminally charged. The courts have literally told them, because you were part of a mob, you are going to prison.
With Joe Biggs, one of those tweets, is the first tweet you pulled up, said that he's getting, Matt Walsh, 17 years for tearing down a fence. But Kellen, you mentioned before the show, he was also screaming a barricade. He was also yelling for people to go in and to do stuff.
No, I just said they were proud. Like there's videos of him saying, we just did it. Yeah, we were just in there. Like, heck yeah, they were happy.
They were taking selfies inside the Capitol and things like that.
And the video in the court in the trial was someone walking up to him being like, we just got in the Capitol. What do you think? And he goes, awesome.
Okay, so he's celebrating.
Yeah. I mean, there's also video of Zachary Rehl, who was also sentenced today. He's getting 15 years, and he was also convicted of seditious conspiracy during this 3-month trial, of him saying, don't go into the Capitol. Don't go in there. And they're like, irrelevant to us. You have to go in because later you threw something at a police officer. I mean, there are things where I can agree, like, it was,
don't throw stuff at cops.
Don't throw stuff at cops. It was out of hand. On the other hand, both of these men have young children, and you're locking them up to prove your political point.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sick.
The metaphor, I think, is like if a bully attacks another kid in school, everyone's like, oh God, you want the bully to lose. So the kid somehow fights back and he beats the bully and he knocks the bully down. Then everyone's like, yay. But if the kid starts stomping on the bully's face and smashing his skull, people will run over and grab the kid and pull him off. The government has gone too far by hitting these guys with 17 years. They're now smashing the skull of the guy. It's unnecessary.
A bit brutal, but I agree.
Extremely brutal what they're doing. And it's going to cause massive it's going to cause sentiment that people are going to start to hate the victim now.
Mm-hmm.
This is right. This is even the Krasensteins are like, we think this is a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Well, and Kelly is the second judge that has said something to the effect of like, because of you, we no longer have stable elections. And
because of him. It's this judge's fault. I hope everybody you understand that, to throw a point to Ian, who often talks about pardoning your enemies. Now, I don't completely agree with pardoning the worst war criminals of our generation, but there is something to be said of the Chinese finger trap problem in that the harder you pull, the worse you make it. Mm-hmm. And this is the judge being, the judge may as well have looked into the camera for NBC News and CNN and said that his goal is to destroy this country, because the sentiment among those who support Trump is that they are coming for you, they are coming for your families, they are using violence, they are like... The sentiment is not, well, justice was served. It's done the exact opposite. This is radicalizing people because the sentence is psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was thinking the sentencing disparity that Matt Walsh brought up, could that be the difference between prosecution and with a federal judge versus like the really relaxed persecution or prosecution that's happening for different states and different cities?
Perhaps, but to the moral question, it doesn't really matter all that much. Right. Obviously, we know that the feds can be more harsh. They tend to win all of their cases, the ones they choose. But it's just when you look at these on the surface of what they are, obviously we can say, bro, if you're going to get into a fight with feds, you're going to lose, hands down. But 17 years for knocking down a barrier? It was one of those like little metal barriers.
Yeah. And
so
not good. You shouldn't do it. Well, and I think you'd go to jail for it, but you'd think someone would get like 6-7 months in jail for something like that.
And I feel like I have to point out,
maybe not even that, 2 months.
I have to point out that the Justice Department asked for 33 years in prison, and they asked for 27 for Zachary Rehl. I mean, this is basically sort of half of what they wanted, and it's still, in my opinion, way too much for what happened.
Right. And the one thing I wanted to bring up is you remember the case where the New York City lawyers during the 2020 protests, they were caught with the Molotov cocktails. They got pretty good sentencing from it. So they weren't given lenient sentencing. Not saying that this isn't harsh, But I think I think the feds are making an example quite clearly, and it's unjustified. And like you said, it's radicalizing people as well. So they're making an example while at the same time radicalizing people, which could possibly create the same circumstance that we ended up before. And I don't think they care much about that. Like they're thinking that step ahead. But I think for us who are just analyzing things, that seems like a plausible thing that could happen. And God forbid, like one of these indictments go through with Trump that, to be honest with you, I'm not a lawyer, but just looking at the different indictments, they don't make much sense to me.
I think that Biggs' lawyer should file an appeal on the grounds that the judge advocated for criminal activity, that the judge attempted to incite the defendant and his associates and those listening to commit crimes. And incitement to commit a crime is a crime in and of itself. So I believe this judge should be impeached. He should be removed and criminally charged for the crime of advocating and inciting others to engage in election interference and seditious conspiracy. Because he outright said, if you don't like how the election is being conducted, speak out, call, write, or meet with election officials. Well, as we know, based on what happened in Georgia and the federal charges, that's illegal. So I think we're going to have to ask the Republicans to criminally charge this judge.
Trump appointee judge. I'm going to throw that one out there.
I don't care who appointed him.
I think that's what, when I went to cover opening statements, that was what was interesting about sitting with the families, was they were saying like, Kelly is a Trump appointee. He's been more flexible about some things, because a lot of them go into this DC courthouse being like, I am in a hostile city where the jury is already biased against our case, and I have a Democrat appointed judge. They feel doomed from the beginning. And this only affirms this feeling from people who support these people, saying, you know, the government is out to get us no matter what. I mean, 300 people are in jail because of January 6th. Over 1,000 have been charged federally. It just seems like, I can't imagine being a business owner in a city where there were significant rioting during the summer of 2020 and thinking like, wow, I wish someone cared about what happened to me as much as DC cares about what happens to itself. I mean, they experienced so much, there was so much loss there, and yet all of the focus is on these people and one specific day. It seems disproportionate to me.
This is not, it is incredible naivety to think that a 17-year sentence will set an example for anybody. The only example this judge has set is that there is a biased neo-lib, neocon uniparty machine that will destroy your life unjustly if you speak out against them in any way. And of course, that's not me defending what Joe Biggs did in tearing down a barricade and, you know, going into the Capitol or whatever. He should not have done that. I imagine riot charge would be a couple of months or something, maybe followed by probation or whatever. But when you look at the crimes committed by the far left, it is fairly obvious. They're being paid money. When the far leftists rioted in DC and burned and set fire to buildings and garbage in the street and a limousine smashing windows, the city paid them millions of dollars. Paid them after they got arrested. When it's the right at the Capitol, I mean, look, and you've also had the left storm into the Senate and, you know, buildings and bang on the Supreme Court doors and go into the Capitol, all of that. Not a peep, nobody cares. So all that they're doing is setting an example that you have oppressors willing to use force against you to take you from your children. And like, if you look at the forums, is what people are saying, the radicalization is terrifying.
And Joe Biden can do this, and then he's going to say, we're not tough on crime, or we are tough on crime. What are you talking about, San Francisco and New York? We locked all these guys up from J6.
What they're going to say...
We protect democracy.
Right. They're going to say,
that's what we do.
We're battling domestic terrorism. Yeah. Never mind what happens to the cities outside of D.C. Never mind the people who lost their businesses in 2020. We don't care about what happens to them. We care about what happens to us as the head of the government.
This has got to be like they're anticipating riots if they take Trump off the ballot and they want to intimidate people into not rioting, or be like, hey, make an example of Joe Biggs, don't even think about it, 17 years if you even think about it, kind of thing. But like, you got to understand the damage. It's not, people aren't machines. They don't respond A to B like a computer program. And if you just can't twist this, man. There's a reason that we have this system built like it's built, so that people in the center don't take control. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on about this.
Let's jump to this story from CNN. The big news today was Donald Trump pleading not guilty in a Georgia election subversion case and seeking to sever his case from co-defendants who want a speedy trial. That's it. Donald Trump sent in a signed document saying that he was waiving his right to appear. He would be pleading not guilty, and we currently await the next steps, which they're trying. Fani Willis wants the trial to be March 4th. But that likely will not happen because what we're hearing, they've got 12 million documents released in discovery, and there's absolutely no way a defense could prepare in that short amount of time. So it's creating an interesting predicament. But the big news outside of Trump's not guilty plea is the DA, Fani Willis, lying to the court, or it appears to the court, in order to justify withholding evidence. We have two tweets, one from Adam Klasfeld saying, DA Willis wants to advise all the defendants in the Trump racketeering case that decisions by Ken Chesebrough and Sidney Powell to invoke speedy trial rights come with certain consequences. Mike Cernovich responded, this isn't even true. It's not how the law works. But this really is a mask-off moment. Fulton County DA threatens to violate the rights of the defendants because she's not prepared for a trial. She actually said that if you request your constitutional right for a speedy trial, you can't argue they're entitled to discovery. They can't argue that they're entitled to notice of the state's similar transaction evidence 10 days in advance. They are precluded from calling any witnesses whose statements were not provided to the state 10 days in advance. And the defendants cannot now complain they have received less than 7 days notice. I'm seeing a ton of legal analysts saying like, wow, she's outright lying. And if you actually look at the cases she's citing for precedent, none of them say what she's saying. She's trying to pull a fast one. Yes, because they're evil, they're corrupt. And at some point, people need to realize this is not law. This is not a judicial system. This is the exercise of political power. And the question that's being posed by this judge in the Proud Boys case and by the DA in Georgia is, can we get away with it? That's the question. And I wonder, a lot of people have said the Supreme Court will intervene. I don't think the Supreme Court's going to intervene as it pertains to the Proud Boys.
No,
I don't.
They might intervene as it pertains to Trump, but we'll see. But already we can see that Democrats are willing to lie in court. I mean, it's not surprising. We saw with Kyle Rittenhouse. They fabricated evidence. Yeah. That's the craziest thing to try and convict that kid. Here we are.
I mean, I don't think they have much of anything. And the way that I was reading the indictments was basically anytime Donald Trump complained about something, that was part of the conspiracy. So they quite literally were listing all of his tweets, which he has a lot. And every single tweet is part of the greater conspiracy at hand. And to me, it makes me wonder, like, does the president have the right for freedom of speech? Does the president have the right to complain? All right, because we have all these different situations in the past where someone is contesting an election and we have a process in place. But that's what we did. He complained. They did a recount. They went through the process. So are you now penalizing him for complaining? Because that's what it sounds like.
That's the case.
Yeah.
You go to prison for it now. And a judge will then advocate others do the same thing you did.
Right.
So
that's why the Supreme Court, I think, will step in, because if it sets a precedent that you can't complain about an election that you disagree with and you can't bring claims about an election that you disagree with, that would undermine the Constitution, the inherent aspect of the U.S. Constitution that just allows us for redress of our, of our.
But I keep hearing from people saying, we've gotten super chats where they're like, Tim, stop acting like the Supreme Court's not going to shut this down. And I'm like, just like they responded to the Texas v. Pennsylvania lawsuit. When Texas said that these other states are engaging in election practices in violation of the Constitution, thus subverting a process we're involved in, the Supreme Court said no. And it's the craziest thing ever, because I feel like this. It was Thomas and Alito who said we have to take this, but the rest of them were like, nah, we want. The reality is they're cowards,
and they just wanted the election to be over with.
I was talking to Will Chamberlain a long time ago about it, and he said, I think he said it on the show. The issue is that if they step into this lawsuit, it will expose them as having no enforcement power. And so the Supreme Court really has to do light things. When they issue rulings, it has to be done in such a way that it can reasonably be accomplished. But if they try and do something more drastic, like send back 5 or 6 states' electoral vote counts to be re-litigated, thus changing the results of the election, then there's questions as to whether or not they can enforce any of these things when people resist their rulings.
Yeah, if they ruled on this Trump case and they were like, no, this is not constitutional. He had a right to question the elections. All the things he did was constitutionally legal. And then the Biden administration continues to go forward with it after Supreme Court declaration. That would be just like tearing the threads of society apart.
And that's what the Supreme Court's worried about, that if they do issue a ruling and the Democrats don't care and keep doing whatever they want, look at it this way. If the Supreme Court intervenes and says these charges against Trump are unconstitutional, they violate the supremacy clause, blah, 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 and then the Democrats say, so what? The Supreme Court no longer exists at that point. And they probably want that.
It's like 9 people, nine people in the Supreme Court right now. 9 people. They have bodyguards. Do they have bodyguards?
Yeah, they have their own.
So it's like 9 people with some protection against the entire federal government, the FTA, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, and then against 9 dudes sitting. And of course, some of them are women, but 9 people sitting on the Supreme Court. Like, they don't have power. It's 9 old people or like 9 judges.
I mean, but that's true of our whole system, right? Like, you have as much power as you can. They have as much power as we consent to give them, and that was the idea of having these branches that balance each other out.
That's technically correct. They have as much power as police are willing to enforce against. So if the Supreme Court says something like, you can no longer bar people from having guns, there's an interesting question. In New York, they ruled that precedent was set that women are allowed to be topless because it is a violation of the Civil Rights Act and constitutional rights for men to be allowed not to wear a shirt, but women being forced to wear a shirt. You still have cops arrest women regularly for going topless because those cops don't care what is legal. They care about their morals. And so there's apparently some like morbidly obese old woman who's in her 50s who intentionally goes around with just like massive old saggy boobs. And the police will be like, ma'am, you need to put a shirt on. And she'll go, no, I don't. And they'll say, then we're going to arrest you. And she goes, do it. She immediately files a lawsuit and they instantly settle every single time because it is illegal. So why is it that these cops are willing to enforce something that's not a law or that's not legally enforceable, but they'll do it anyway? So the issue then becomes the Supreme Court comes in and says, you have to release Trump. And they go, no. Supreme Court's going to bang the gavel again. Well, we order you to release Trump. No, thank you.
And then what's supposed to happen? Like a rogue executive branch is like, no, we're not gonna. Then is that when the FBI turns on the executive branch?
No,
like,
there are the executive branch.
Who guards the Supreme Court? What's the military structure that protects the Supreme Court from a crazy executive
Marshals,
branch?
I guess.
U.S. Marshals.
But I'm not sure that they're dedicated explicitly to just the Supreme Court. I'm not sure.
There's a Supreme Court. I think they're the Supreme Court police. I might be getting their title wrong because I remember when after Roe v. Wade came out, one of the big challenges was the fact that people, a lot of their homes had been doxxed. And so they were needing to sort of redouble the support that their security had. And I remember Congress specifically passing something to make sure that the protection was extended to their families because it had become so critical because these rioters just stayed outside their house. I mean, I guess they're not rioters, they're just protesters. But
yeah, the marshals are the enforcement arm of the U.S. federal courts.
That's cool. That's Vivek wants to move a lot of the FBI over to the U.S. Marshals. It sounds almost innocuous, but that's a big difference, serving the executive branch or serving the judicial branch. I didn't used to think it was a big difference. I thought it was all serving the American government, and I would like it to maintain that and continue to be that.
I agree. And I think that makes sense as far as what Will Chamberlain was saying. That's why it has to be light things. It can't be something grand because who's going to enforce it? So you're talking about protecting themselves. But how do you enforce something like that when you're talking about actually possibly imprisoning someone, for something that great? I don't think they have much teeth. They don't have any real way of enforcing it. So they, like you said, they're kind of cowards and they move away from it.
I think that you combine what's going on with Trump and the J6ers and like Joe Biggs, and they are perhaps intentionally creating a recipe for disaster. They want an explosion. I wonder if the mentality of these people is that either we win or everyone loses.
But why? I don't
know. There's a really funny quote from Michael Malice: "Pizzagate aged better than Russiagate." I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying these people fear criminal prosecution for a variety of crimes, like Joe Biden engaging in the Burisma scandal. The things they accused Trump of turned out to be lies. In fact, Ukraine Gate was the best because it turned out that Trump was actually the good guy trying to weed out the corruption. And then they go and protect Joe Biden instead. So there are criminals actively using law enforcement against the just American people who are trying to put a stop to their corruption. And it's unsurprising. People who want to play by the rules are being beaten down by those who are cheating. It's the exact same scenario when you end up with a criminal with a gun breaking into a liquor store and killing the clerk who doesn't have a gun. The law says you can't have a gun, so the criminals don't care and do whatever they want. And the innocent civilians aren't allowed to protect themselves and get victimized because of it. And now you have in the political system, Republicans being like, well, we got to go slow and play by the rules. And Democrats are like, let's just cheat. Do whatever we want, lock them all up. And then if we lose, well, then we just burn it all to the ground.
But I think this is a much bigger thing, talking about how big the federal government has become. And when you talked about the establishment, the only time that the mainstream media ever said that Trump was presidential was when he bombed Syria.
Yeah, they were very happy about that.
They were very happy about that. I think back to Obama. One of the reasons why people were disappointed by Obama, because Obama gave all these lofty goals, like these really big things that he was going to do for the American people. And what did he do? He went in and played ball and did like what everybody else does. And guess what? They loved him for it. But as soon as you start to reject those things, you start to not play ball. You start to reject the establishment. You start to reject war. You start to mess up with other industries, calling out corruption. Nobody likes that. And I think this is the counter effect to it. So while some people think it's the I don't like his mean tweets, really it's about him challenging the status quo. Well, I don't think he's perfect, but there's a certain element that pisses people off within the federal government that he's doing. And I think this is part of the punishment for doing so.
You guys ever play Civilization? It's a game, great
course.
game. Tim, you know it. And it's as if the U.S. military-industrial complex, funnily enough, was going for a military victory. They're attempting to conquer and control Earth with police state. They have military bases all over. They want order through military force. Then Trump comes in and he's like, no, I want to change our victory condition. Let's do something cultural. Or something. I don't even know what his victory condition was, but it wasn't military. And they're like,
it was space victory.
Space. He wanted a technology victory. So, but they're like, dude, we have all these troops. We are paying for them. We cannot just stop. We can't disband our entire fort. We've spent decades building this army. It's in position. And Trump's like, I'm not doing it. And they're like, dude, we cannot have this guy run the country because he's screwing up our military victory.
I don't think it's, I mean, that's one way to put it. But the reality is Trump's right now, Trump is saying, one, yes, bring our troops home. Secure our borders, bring back manufacturing. And you have people who have built their whole lives around the liberal economic order. That is, maintain world police. It's not that, they want a military victory, but I get your point. It's more so that Trump is saying, how do we make America better? How do we improve the lives of our citizens? Whereas these people are like, how do we control the world? Citizens be damned.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like when you asked earlier, why would they do this? I think it's because, well, there's probably different people would do it for different reasons. Some people probably because he's called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig. And they're like, I will do anything to not have that in my life. But some people are afraid like he's going to screw up the victory condition.
Well, let's go to the dark side from this, from Timcast.com. Tucker Carlson says America is speeding toward assassination of Donald Trump. That's a scary prospect. He said they protested him. They called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. They fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times. And every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to a protest, then you go to impeachment, then you go to indictment. None of them work. What's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously. And no one will say that. But I don't know how you can't reach that conclusion. You know what I mean? Like they have decided, permanent Washington, both parties have decided that there's something about Trump that's so threatening to them, they just can't have him. He later commented, I don't know where it's going, but there's a collusion that's clearly imminent. I've never been this worried about anything as I am about where this is going. If people don't get serious about their comfort zones, I think they're going to demonize him, indict him, And I think they'll blow his airplane up, Jones said. This is Alex Jones. I really, at a gut level, believe they're going to kill Trump. There was a story in, I think it was 2015, a guy tried grabbing a gun from a cop at a Trump rally. There's already been threats made against Donald Trump. And I guess we can only hope and pray it doesn't come to that. But Tucker makes a really interesting point. Now, I will counter. He's not gotten more popular every time they've indicted him. Because I track the favorability and popularity of Trump. It is stable. Stable is potentially as bad or worse. Stable means that there are people who don't care what the government does or says. They will never abandon Trump. That's it. It also says there are people that no matter what will never support Trump.
Right.
If Trump got more or less popular because of the indictments, that would mean something. Becoming less popular means there are people who supported him but now are backing away. If he becomes more popular, it means that people who didn't support him are starting to support him. No, it hasn't changed because it's locked in right now. The left and the right, whatever you want to call it, the political factions are stable. And that means all of the things they're doing are just radicalizing people and making the flames bigger and more dangerous.
Which I kind of assume is what they want, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's, man, there's a lot of scenarios in my mind. But if Tucker is correct, I don't see how this country survives another year, 2 years, year and a half.
I don't think Tucker's correct. I forget who we had on the show, but he said you can't, in 2023, you can't do what you did in the 60s, right? You can't give somebody the Kennedy treatment. I think they've already done it to Trump. And we've seen it. It's the indictments. It's the mainstream media with all the pieces throughout his presidency. It's all of that. That they've already taken him down, or at least attempted to.
I don't think so.
I don't think
Trump is predicted to win right now. So CNN reported this, not my opinion, calm down, crackpots. CNN said right now, based on all the data they got, it's looking really good for Trump. Now you take into consideration that the student loan debt about to kick back on in the next couple of weeks. Think about this. So I was talking to my girlfriend about this earlier. I said, I was passively talking about it, and then she was like, wait, everyone's got to pay back their student loans again starting in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, yeah, something like that. And then she was like, they're not going to have the money. And I'm like, right, exactly. And then I said, and the question then becomes, how do they pay for their student loans? If right now we got all these videos of young people saying, I can't afford my bills, how are they going to pay back their student loans if student loan repayment restarts? They're not. And then I'm like, so it's kind of like 2008. They gave out loans to people who didn't have credit and couldn't afford it. And then my girlfriend was like, well, they got their parents to co-sign. She's like, a lot of these people got their parents to co-sign. And I was like, interesting.
Yep. Then
when these 28-year-olds don't pay back their loans, and then the lenders say, your mom or dad is a co-signer, and goes to them and says, you got to pay. And then they go, we can't afford to pay. And they go, then we take your house.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing TikToks of people that age crying, saying, I did what I was supposed to do. I got the degree. I work hard. I don't party. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I can't afford food. And I guarantee if it becomes between student loans and putting food on your table, you're not going to pay the student loans. So you're going to let them default.
But then what are you going to do when you're like, sorry, mom and dad,
exactly.
you're going to lose your house. You're going to have to pay the consequences of my actions. I mean, that is a result of the student loan thing, but I think it's going to make a very divided and bitter society.
A bailout.
Yeah.
Also, the only circumstance that seems to make sense would be a government bailout of the student loan system. And that is going to be a disaster because that's another $1 trillion plus instantly pumped into the economy by way of forgiveness, which will cause massive inflation or has already contributed to it. But oh boy, if you thought rich men north of Richmond was bad, wait till you go to the likes of Oliver Anthony and say, oh, here's the best part. The highest income earners in the country who have nothing but disdain for you and told you to go learn to code just got a $50,000 freebie from the government.
Yeah.
And if that happened, that would mean pumping another $1 trillion in would mean that your dollar is worth like 96 cents right after that happens. All those people that already paid their loans back, that have their money devalued, are going to go. Maybe not all of them, but enough. A lot of them get angry at people that are taking the government's tit.
To go back to the initial story, right? Tucker is saying, where does it go next? People need to consider that none of this stuff is happening in a vacuum. And when it came to the lockdowns and the George Floyd riots, I actually think the lockdowns were the cause of the riots, not George Floyd. We had seen protests before. I do not believe the George Floyd video is the reason why we had such massive and widespread rioting. I think the rioting was likely people were fed up. They were locked in their homes. They were angry. They had no income. Their purpose was stripped. They were becoming unhinged and depressed. And then they were given some, a spark for the tinder. A lot of people will probably say it was George Floyd, whatever. The media definitely said it was George Floyd, but I think we talked about it at the time, that this pent up rage from being locked up. So you take a look at what's going on with Donald Trump as president. You take a look at what's happening now with student loan repayment about to kick in. The economy may fall off a cliff in the next couple of months. We got the guy from Shark Tank saying it. You got Michael Burry of Big Short fame, who shorted the housing market, making a $1.6 billion bet against the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. I think both. It might just be S&P. And we don't know if he's actually cashed out yet or where he's at. But he made a very, very, very big bet against the U.S. economy. And the student loan repayment seems to make the most sense. People who don't have jobs, who can't afford to pay their bills, being told the bill comes due, they're not going to pay it. If you go up to a 27-year-old and say, you can pay your rent, you can buy your gas, or you can buy food, or you can pay your student loans, they're going to say, okay, well, if I don't have food, I die. If I don't have gas, I can't go to work and can't make money. And if I don't pay rent, I'm homeless. Sorry, student loans ain't getting paid.
For anybody that has student loans that isn't able to afford them right now, you can do two things. You can put them on a forbearance or you can put them on a deferment depending on your income level. So look into that. You can set them off for years and not have to pay them.
But isn't most of the student loan debt basically owed to the government?
Yes. Over 90, I think it's like 90, at minimum 94%. The majority of it is owned by the government. So the government gave you bad loans and then is saying you have to pay them. Actually, we might just bail ourselves out. We don't know what we're going to do. I mean, it's a terrible system. And we're still issuing student loans. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
It's a point of irritation with me because it just seems like a terrible business model. Yet the U.S. government's like, no, it's fine. Keep getting student loans. Go to college. That's the answer. Even though we have evidence, it's so clear the system is broken and potentially could destroy generations of a family that have worked really hard to create financial stability.
Yeah, I completely agree. And speaking from a perspective of a father, my son is 17. He'll be 18 October. And I've even written articles about this and talked about it on TV. Raising a son, and someone who's looking like me the older he gets, and I'm thinking about his prosperity. The only thing I've ever been worried about with my son is what is he going to do as far as college? That's the only thing. I wasn't worried about puberty. I wasn't worried about any of that stuff. Worried about him being rebellious. Never worried about that. The only thing I've ever been worried about, probably since the age of 12, is like, oh my God, my son's about to be a teenager and he's going to start thinking about what he's going to do after school. And I think about how unfair of a message it is to spread to kids that the only way for you to find success is to sign on a dotted line. You have no credit history, right? You have no income, you have no job prospects, but you have to sign on a dotted line and have hope that whatever you're intending to pursue is going to work out. And obviously, that's not what happens. And every year, some kid is competing against you and so on and so forth. And they're unprepared. And then you send them out into the world. So they work at Starbucks making minimum wage and tell them they have to pay back $80,000. Meanwhile, their parents told them, well, that's what we did. Yes, but you're not in their situation. You're not dealing with a gouging student loan market. You're not dealing with universities who can charge whatever they want because the federal government will pay it anyways, right? They're not dealing with these things. And parents, as a parent, I'm saying other parents have given their children bad information and they're not being aware of what is actually going on. They're just telling them to follow my footsteps. Well, they're following their footsteps into financial hell, basically.
Yeah, it's like the area that they walked through is now flooded, and they tell their kid to walk back through it. That's not a good tactic.
It's like when parents say, well, why don't you just go work at McDonald's? That's how I paid my way through college. Yeah, you can't do that these days.
So how did you inspire your son? What's his next move? What advice did you give him?
I told him the truth. I told him that college is incredibly expensive, and you need to weigh all options. There was a period of time that he wanted to do artistry, and he wanted to go over to Japan. I've told him, go to other countries.
Japan's good.
Yeah. Now he's changed that idea and he's still thinking about it. But I'm not one of those parents like, you have to do something as soon as you turn 18. He wants to go bounce around Europe next year, but he's working. Nice. He's been working this entire time. We started doing homeschooling, but I'm having him think for himself rather than force a narrative onto him that the only way to find success in this world is through college. And for me, as someone who worked in IT, I did the same job as everybody else who got their computer science degree. I went to a 11-month program, for tech school.
Instead of 4 years of bachelor's and crazy amounts of tuition.
Yeah, my student loans are paid off. So, there are alternatives. And I think parents just have to be aware that what you went through is not what these kids are going through. They're set up for failure going that route. They're set up for a lifetime of financial hurt.
And radicalization.
And one other thing I just want to add, we're talking about the economy dipping. Interest rates for housing. My wife and I are looking to buy a house next year. We're looking at the interest rate. What's the situation that we're going to be facing? So now the kids have, I don't know how much money in debt. The interest rates are going up. So even if some kid is able to find a decent job, they can't afford to purchase a home. Rent's gone up. One of the reasons we're looking to buy a house is because we renewed our lease, $300 increase.
Yep.
Now, thankfully, we make decent income together, but we're a married couple. What about these kids, right? So I foresee the Europe is like a European style setup that's happening in America, because all the European adults that I know, most of them live with other people, live with other adults. They all have roommates.
That's where we're going.
Yeah.
I want to jump to this story from Timcast.com. Alabama Attorney General says the state can prosecute people who facilitate out-of-state abortions. Alabama will not permit abortionists to defy our laws and enrich themselves by marketing hopelessness to women. What did I say? A few months ago? What did I say when Roe v. Wade was overturned? My concern is that you will end up in a situation where a state that bans abortion says encounters a conflict with its citizens, its residents, and a state that has limitless abortion. This is a component of that escalation. We've talked about even recently Colorado and Oklahoma, where in Oklahoma it's completely banned, in Colorado it's completely unrestricted. What happens when there's a couple, they're together, they get pregnant, as it were, and then after 6 months the woman says, I'm just really unhappy, and maybe justified, maybe not. Maybe she's the good person, maybe she's cheating and she wants to leave. So she goes, I cannot leave my husband unless I get rid of this baby. So at, let's say, 7 or 8 months, she flees in the middle of the night to Colorado. The man then says, the baby can survive and she's going to kill it. And he reports her to law enforcement. Would Oklahoma take action? Now, apparently, as of now, no. But this is what Alabama has effectively begun the process of. And not even in the scenario I described. In the scenario where you have like a guy saying, please, officer, law enforcement, the baby is 8 months, gestated and can survive outside of the womb. Do not let her kill it. I will raise it on my own. She can leave. I don't care. And she says, no, I don't care. I'm gone. I'm going to go do it. There's a conflict. In Alabama, they're just saying outright and they can do it. Here's the story. Alabama has the power to prosecute people who help women leave the state to get an abortion, according to a new filing from the Attorney General Steve Marshall. Marshall has challenged a lawsuit filed by two pro-abortion groups, the ACLU and the Yellowhammer Fund, against the state. The AG has asked the United States District Court for the Middle District of Alabama to dismiss the lawsuit. In his motion to dismiss, Marshall pointed out the plaintiffs are not challenging the constitutionality of the state's broad ban on abortions. Instead, they argue that because some other states allow such abortion, plaintiffs have a right to conspire with others in Alabama to try and have abortions performed out of state. Plaintiffs are mistaken. Prosecuting someone for forming a conspiracy in Alabama is not an extraterritorial application of Alabama law, simply because the planned conduct is to occur beyond state lines. Plaintiffs assert that there is some difference because the object of their conspiracy is legal where it might occur. But they don't explain why that makes any constitutional difference, and it doesn't. The conspiracy is what is being punished, even if the conduct never occurs. That conduct is Alabama-based and within Alabama's power to prohibit. Now, to take that interpretation of the law and apply it to the scenario I was just proposing, a woman in the middle of the night decides she's going to leave her husband and travel to another state to get an abortion so that she can leave him. The state then says, premeditated murder, not the act itself. We're getting you for what you planned in our state. And we have evidence that you packed up, prepared, and sought to leave to go get aid in the killing of a human life. And did she talk to anyone before? Did she in any way get advice from, get funding from Planned Parenthood, for instance? What happens then in Alabama? Let's go to Alabama right now. The question I ask you, under this ruling, A woman goes to a Planned Parenthood or an underground clinic, but Planned Parenthood is probably the better example. And they say, I want to get an abortion. They say, well, we can't do it in state, but don't worry. Here's the information you need to cross the borders. What happens then when the AG gets a bunch of state troopers and they surround a Planned Parenthood and say, you are all under arrest for criminal conspiracy to commit abortion? I'm not saying that happens anytime soon. I honestly don't know. My point is this. This is exactly what I was worried about when I said with Roe v. Wade, the next grain of sand in the heap is going to be law enforcement saying we've banned abortion. Doesn't mean you can just go do it somewhere else. It's illegal. And then what happens when a person is a fugitive from the law, getting an abortion in, let's say Oklahoma, Colorado is the best example. Oklahoma petitions, as everyone's talked about with Trump and the marshals and how it would go down. Oklahoma petitions the federal government and says a fugitive from law is currently in Colorado. What happens when Colorado says we're a sanctuary for abortion and we will not allow you to enforce this warrant? Mm-hmm. You got the makings of federal and interstate conflict. Yeah,
it is kind of hard to understand what will happen. I really don't know. Alabama's an interesting study for a couple reasons. Their abortion ban won't. That says women who obtain abortions are not civilly or criminally liable. So they couldn't go after the woman herself for going out of state, but they could go after, like, the Yellowhammer Fund would pay for her travel, let's say, or put her up on a hotel. So they could go after anyone who's involved with that organization. The other thing about Alabama to note is that they have the Human Life Protection Act, which passed in 2019, which is also interesting because I remember pre-Roe, we were all talking about this was sort of something a lot of states were preparing for. They were updating their abortion-related laws. And with the Human Life Protection Act, it defines the fetus as a person legally. And so
in Alabama?
In Alabama.
Wow.
So again, they were taking steps to define all of these things that we debate and that are debated nationally all the time because they have a strong position on it and what they want to do. And like I said, I think it's hard to tell what would happen. Every state has different laws. So with Alabama, they wouldn't go after the woman. They would go after, her friend who drives her out of state, maybe, or the whoever pays for her hotel or something like that.
What if she calls an Uber and gets an Uber across state lines? Do they arrest the Uber driver for conspiracy even if they didn't know what was going on?
I mean, I think it would be hard to, if like that did happen, the arrest of the Uber driver. And I'm not a lawyer, I just play one on this podcast apparently. But if the Uber driver took someone out of state and then had to go to court and was like, I had no idea, I've never met this person, I work for Uber, it would be very hard to then have a conviction, in my opinion.
Yeah, how could you ever prove conspiracy unless you have a recorded conversation?
Right, but if it's a couple and, they get pregnant accidentally and they go out of state, if the woman can't be criminally or civilly challenged, could her boyfriend who drove her out of state?
But why can't the pregnant woman herself be criminally charged?
That's just Alabama law, and a lot of states have something like that.
And that a judge will probably strike that down in 2 seconds.
I mean, the law's in effect, but maybe if it were to go to trial, it'd be tested.
If this gets tested, you can't have a scenario where a pregnant woman sits down next to her not pregnant friend, and the pregnant woman says, I want to abort this baby. And the friend says, I can give you information on a clinic. And then they go, but only the woman who said she knew where the clinic was goes to jail. What? The initiator of the criminal conspiracy is the pregnant woman herself. Now, I'm not saying women should be imprisoned for seeking abortions. Not at all. I'm actually the more old school Democrat pro-choice position. I'm just saying these two laws can't legally exist. Because you're going to end up with someone challenging the constitutionality of the criminal conspiracy saying, for what reason does this one criminal act have an exception where the person who initiates the conspiracy is exempt from the law? And the judge is going to have to say, you can't do that. Either the law applies to everybody or nobody. And if the law itself is conspiracy and not abortion, then the pregnant woman must be charged with conspiracy along with her friend.
But the part that confuses me is that you're saying that Alabama says that the fetus is a human being. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't it be conspiracy to murder?
Right.
It's a great question.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of what's the actual charge? Personally, I don't think that there's enough here. I don't think there would be enough here to prove the conspiracy angle. And on top of that, is there much enforcement for it? You can create as many laws as you want. Is there going to be much enforcement?
What does enforcement look like, right?
Right.
Yeah, I hate this idea of charging someone for something they did outside of the jurisdiction where it was illegal. Mm-hmm. Weed's illegal in a state, so you go to a state where it's legal, get high, you come back and they're like, you're a fugitive. You just broke the law.
Right, no, I didn't. To clarify, the AG is literally saying you are right. And that the crime that's being punished is the conspiracy to commit an act.
So the conspiracy to go smoke pot.
So-
Could you imagine if they try and bust you on a conspiracy to go to a state where something's legal to do it?
That happens all the time. That is absolutely normal, has been around for hundreds of years. If you are in a state and you come together with buddies and plot a crime in another state, regardless, yeah, they're
But
going to...
if it's not a crime in the other state, you're plotting to go to another state to gamble, for instance. I'm going to Vegas to gamble. Is that
But
conspiracy now because it's illegal here?
That's why the Attorney General's statement of like, it's an Alabama law and it's illegal here, and so that's what matters is what he's saying.
I don't think that a state can decide what I can do in another state. That's insane.
It's interesting for sure. I mean, the idea, what it makes me think of is like how powerful all the states and how important is state residency, right? Like if you claim residency in that state, are you supposed to obey those laws more than anything else, even when you're in other states? It's hard to say. I will say it would be interesting to contrast this law to the Idaho abortion trafficking law. So Idaho borders Washington. Washington is basically very pro-abortion. They've got all kinds of times you can undergo an abortion, but Idaho is much more restrictive. And so they had this abortion trafficking law saying like if I'm remembering the language correctly, it's specific to minors. So if a minor got pregnant and approached Planned Parenthood or approached, a friend's mom and said, can you please take me to Washington or wherever, Washington is just the key example, to get an abortion, that adult could be brought up on criminal charges because they are, if they don't tell the minor's parents. So if they traffic a kid a pregnant teenager out of the state to get an abortion and bring them back, that's against an Idaho law. And the governor of Washington was really adamant that this was a terrible idea and asked them to take it down.
Ian, you make a really, really good point about the absurdity of a system based on pure logic that would say, if it's illegal here, you cannot plan to do it. And that's interesting because you mentioned gambling. Texas, for instance, I just did a quick cursory search. Largely illegal to gamble in Texas. It is a crime to place wagers on sporting events and, card games. They have card houses for the most part where you're allowed to do it. So it's questionable as to what they determine to be gambling. And I guess the issue with poker in Texas is that it's considered a skill game, so it doesn't fall in the same category. But the biggest casino, I think, in the country is on the border just north of Texas in Oklahoma. And that's where everyone drives to go. Clearly, you have to talk with your friends and make a plan to go drive up to the country's biggest casino. I think maybe in one of the world's biggest casinos. And then I think it's like a mile wide or something. And then commit crimes. But what that really tells us is our legal system is based on culture and morality and not the written letter of the law. Like I said 1,000,001 times, it's illegal for women to skydive on Sunday in Florida. Google it. It's true. They don't arrest anyone for doing it. Right? There's a ton of laws in the books, like you can't put an apple pie on the windowsill on Tuesday because it mattered back then, but doesn't matter now. What the question that's being asked right now is, as our culture breaks down and law becomes the pure exercise of power, all that matters, and I guess this is actually a more black-pilled prescription or perspective. When you're looking at the Joe Biggs case and they're saying we're going to give him 17 years because he's a terrorist, it's like, were the terrorist laws written to prevent a guy from knocking down a 4-foot steel barricade? I don't think so. I think they were written because we're concerned about people blowing stuff up. But now it's being applied in a way that they've decided they can. Morality be damned. You have the question of skydiving in Florida. No one's going to enforce that because nobody, left or right, would agree with the enforcement of it. No one in Texas agrees that you should criminally prosecute someone for conspiracy because they went to go gamble 45 minutes away in Oklahoma. But you're right. They did conspire to commit a crime in the future, and it doesn't matter where they do it. So now the question is, when it comes to abortion, what will we see in terms of the morality? You are going to have AGs who are pro-life. You hear Seamus on the show when he says abortion should be banned nationwide. In the moral view of a pro-life AG, abortion must be stopped. In a state like Alabama, where they've banned it, they're going to use the law to whatever novel claim they can to enforce a ban on abortion.
It sounds like the beginning of attempt at pre-crime, where they're going to get you and arrest you before you do the crime just by thinking about it, kind of thing. I don't like it.
But conspiracy is a component of a criminal action. But I think the issue here is you're right, but it shows that laws are only enforced based on what our society deems to be morally acceptable or unacceptable. No one would stand for a couple of drinking buddies being like, we got to go up to Oklahoma on Sunday and hit the blackjack tables, and the cops bust in the door, but like, you're busted for conspiracy to gamble.
Show me your ID.
And no one would have thought this possible either. But the issue of abortion is so morally polarized that Oklahoma, Colorado, it's banned there. What happens if you get an AG? Maybe they won't do it now, but let's give it a few years. A new AG comes in and he's thinking, I want to win political points because I want to run for the governor's office. I want to run for the Senate. The only way I do it is if I cater to the wants and desires of the people of my state. Polls come out saying 67, 80% of Oklahomans want abortion banned and people who get abortions to be criminally charged. He's going to go, okay, if I am the AG of ending abortion, I'm going to win the governor's race in 4 years. So what does he do? Conspiracy to commit abortion, conspiracy to facilitate abortion, sends police to the border. What I think we're seeing with the polarization of politics in this country is Democrats aren't going to stop because their base demands it. They want to get elected. They'll do whatever they have to. Republicans don't want to stop because they want to get reelected, and they'll do what their base says. Both sides are demanding more and more dissociative outcomes or dissociated outcomes. The right says no abortion. The left says unlimited abortion. And now their states have to escalate that policy and procedure, which means in states with unrestricted abortion, they need to add more to it. Now they're going to have to, you got Gavin Newsom, I think it's Newsom right here in the article saying, we will not cooperate with any state that attempts to prosecute women or doctors for receiving or providing reproductive care. Now we're seeing the escalation. Not only will these states allow unlimited and unrestricted abortion, meaning a baby at 9 months, they're also saying they will defy federal law enforcement from trying to stop a woman from traveling to their state to get an abortion in defiance of their own state's laws. The right will then have to escalate in kind, like this Alabama AG is outright saying, we will arrest you for conspiracy before you get the chance. There is going to be an escalation. Gavin Newsom will then say, we will use the powers of our government to protect you if they try to persecute you. And then Alabama will say, if the feds won't do it, we will send our law enforcement or hire private contractors to go and retrieve the criminal fugitive.
That's where you lose me. I don't know how states will have the, have the resources to do this. If we're truly seeing women start to flee the state for abortions, I don't think any state has the manpower.
It's called G4S.
What is that?
Security, private security company. It's called Securitas. Then you've got PMCs. If it really comes to the point,
basically mercenaries.
Mercenaries.
Are you kidding? Mercenaries hunt down women. That's insane.
Well, look at where we're at right now. States are either banning it outright and threatening to criminally prosecute those involved, like Alabama is, or they're doing the inverse, saying that there is no restriction at all on when an abortion can take place, and they will defy the federal government from intervening in a warrant.
It is so wild that the states are so different like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What's your?
Well, I was actually thinking that I don't know if this is even something that could work. There could be something where we start seeing temporary residencies for women who are getting abortions, right? Because when I got an abortion, I wasn't a resident of Alabama. I was a resident of a neighboring state. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be the way that they kind of subvert that conspiracy charge. So these women or anybody who tries to help them, because they became a resident and then a month later they had the abortion. So you can't say we conspired in this other state. So I think that could be something. And if states like California are like the polar opposite, well, if they're going to do that, we're going to do this, then that could be something that you see someone like Gavin Newsom saying, well, you know what? If they're saying they can't have abortions, we're going to, not only we're going to say they can do it here, but we're going to put them in housing here too. Mm-hmm. So they don't get those charges. They're just, it's going to keep escalating. I don't know about making it like some sort of police force or anything like that or going private security. I think the next step would be finding legal ways where they can get away with it. And I think temporary housing would be one of those things. They can claim residency for a period of time while they have an abortion, and then they can move back.
But it's all a great super chat. Someone quoting Steve D saying we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of political will, from Jason Hutchinson. And so it doesn't matter what anyone does. It doesn't matter what legal loophole someone tries to create. It just matters that an AG in another state says, I don't care what you call it, right? You got one judge telling the Proud Boys, you should have called an election official or wrote to them. You got another DA saying, because you wrote to election officials and asked them to help you, you're going to jail. We're going to criminally charge you.
Yeah.
So it's an issue of willpower. I want to jump back to student loans, though. The story we were looking at is from CNN. Student loan interest resumes Friday and payments restart in October. Here's what borrowers should know. For the first time in more than 3 years, federal student loan borrowers will be required to pay their monthly student loan bills starting in October. The pandemic-related pause, which went into effect March 2020, provided relief to nearly 44 million borrowers by freezing their accounts. Interest will start accruing again on September 1st, after rates were effectively set to zero. Since March 2020, we know that now interest rates, which are fixed and vary by loan, will return to the same rate they were before the freeze. But borrowers still won't need to take any action until their first monthly payment is due, which means if you don't take action, you will be accruing interest on your debt and then have to pay more money.
And as an aside, the difference between a forbearance and a deferment is that a forbearance means you don't have to pay, but you're still accruing interest, whereas a deferment, you don't pay, but you don't accrue interest. And those are ideal, if you're going to put them off.
For most borrowers, the first payment will be due sometime in October, but not everyone has the exact same date. Borrowers can expect to receive their bill listing their payment around the due date at least 21 days beforehand. So will my payments be the same? They generally will be. How do I find out? Blah, blah, blah. My payments were automatic before. Blah, blah. These questions aren't really as relevant. What happens if I don't pay my student loan bill? Because interest will start accruing on September 1st, not making a payment will result in a borrower owing more on their student loans over time. But for the next year, through September 30, 2024, the government is providing what it's calling an on-ramp period, during which borrowers are shielded from other normal consequences of missing a payment. A loan servicer won't, for example, report the loan as being in default to the national credit rating agencies. Borrowers don't need to apply for this benefit. This is one of the funnier elements of this. It means that as the economy starts crumbling and debt spirals out of control, you won't be able to know about it because they're not going to report the delinquencies. That means when that on-ramp period ends, you're going to see delinquencies from like 3% to like 43% overnight.
I wonder if we get to a point, just like we were just talking about with laws, where people are like, I don't respect that law. People are just like, I don't respect my debt.
I think there are a lot of people who say stuff like that. They're
gone.
like, why, this is like, I'm never going to be able to play this off. I'm not going to deal with it. Like, there's nothing I can do. I mean, ultimately, theoretically, with consequences, but this is why the argument of like, Joe Biden campaigned on, I am going to forgive student loans. That was him saying, essentially, I'm going to bail you guys out. And that's what why people feel attached to him, I think, and why it's potentially the biggest flaw in his campaign, because there are people who are counting on the fact that they will not have to pay these loans because they see it as an impossible financial hurdle.
What were you saying?
I was going to say the biggest problem for me is that there's nothing stopping it from happening again if they were to bail everybody out, right? Because
unless they stopped issuing government-backed student loans, which they won't do. They still haven't done it. Sorry.
Well, even on top of that, they're not doing anything as far as the universities. What's their culpability to it? Like, why does the same school that taught your parents, how come it costs 10 times more? No one addresses that, but they can just charge whatever they want and the government just packs it up. How come the government doesn't have stipulations, right?
Why can't you default on student loans?
Right. Why can't we do? Well, then, yeah.
You used to be able to. I think George Bush Jr. made it illegal to bankrupt your student loans, 2003 or something.
Right, because, and I'm willing to bet, I could be wrong, it's because the federal government stepped up even more with student loans. So they said, if we're going to step up even more and invest in the American public, we can't have them all defaulting because that would default the government. Well, here we are.
Rather than just be like, maybe this isn't a great system. Maybe we should consider not issuing these. Maybe we shouldn't be so obsessed with college being the one path to anywhere in America.
I'm sorry.
I get that banks are for profit, so they want to charge you interest to make money, which is disgusting, but that's the system. But that the government is doing this for profit, that they're going to loan me money and then expect interest back. Like they loaned me 20 grand. I don't want to pay them back more than 20 grand. I've already paid $13,000 in interest.
But it's not so much about a profit. It's about how the modern monetary system works. And with the creation of the money supply, what they want you to do is pay back. Grant, don't get me wrong. Like a lot of these interest rates are greater than the rate of inflation. But a component of it is if the economy is inflating by 3%, we want you to pay back comparable buying power. If we give you 100 apples, we want 100 apples back. Guess what? In a year, apples are going to cost more money. you're gonna need more money to pay back.
I'd be down with that if you paid back with your increase with inflation. If it went up with inflation, that would be understandable. That would be logistical. But this just flat out interest rates, compound interest on 18-year-olds that aren't taught about compound interest, full predatory, man. And I don't refuse to pay back the interest. I'm not interested in doing it.
Here's a story from entrepreneur.com. This gets worse before it gets better. Kevin O'Leary warns of real chaos set to hit the U.S. economy this fall. I thought this was interesting. I saw this a couple days ago. He said, you're just starting to see the chips fall. The layering is as follow. The regional banks don't know yet what their capital requirements are going to be. So their loan books have closed like a turtle in a shell. This gets worse before it gets better. And what's it doing to small business? Killing them right now. O'Leary argued that not enough money is being pumped into small businesses and blamed the most recent Fed hikes, including a benchmark raise of 0.25% last month. Yada, 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 yada. The only thing I really care about this article is it's another high-profile business person sounding the alarm bells in the economy. And after learning about what's about to happen with student loans kicking in and a lot of people not being able to pay them back, it is not unreasonable, in my opinion, that could be a large catalyst, or at least a small component of. I don't know if it's be the big component or the small component of some kind of economic crisis, especially if it hits the co-signers on the student loan debt. And then, of course, you have, I've mentioned several times, Michael Burry betting against the U.S. stock market. It seems like the people who have a lot of money are concerned the market's going to take a hit. I have no idea what that means. I got people asking me every day, like, should I buy property right now? I'm like, I had no idea. Because they're like, but if the market's going to crash. I'm like, maybe, probably. I have no idea.
What upsets
Good
me
luck.
the most, and it's so infuriating, is we get these jobs numbers out every month, and the White House or mainstream media, take your pick, they put this positive little spin on it and wrap it up in a little bow, rather than just telling the Americans, hey, here's the problem, and here's what you guys can do as citizens of this country to help everybody and work towards resolving this problem, because it is so complex and there's no easy solution out of this.
The economy?
Yeah. I mean, this all ties into the state of the economy right now.
It's not monetary, that's for sure. We're not going to fix the economy by another kind of money. It's going to be through materials. I talked with Stu Peters about this. I believe it's live on his channel on Rumble, but I'll be posting a link on that on Twitter later. The interview I did with Stu Peters. It's technology. If we can make energy cheaper, make fuel cheaper, then the economy has become better. And so if a tenth of the economy is fuel and you make that a tenth cheaper, you've basically made 1% of your economy. You've made your economy a 1% better. So it's like, that's why I'm obsessed with hydrogen fuel right now. Like, I feel like we can make cheap fuel, make cheap heat, electricity, building materials, transportation, the basics.
The trouble is when you see these videos at a Times Square where someone goes up to another person and says, name a country that starts with the letter U, and they can't do it. Or they say, like, who's the current president of the United States, and they don't know it. And they'll say, like, when did America get its independence? And they'll be like, 1871. Like, they've no idea. And you have a lot of these people, they vote. And when you see these videos, there are powerful individuals who then are deeply offended that these people are consuming resources and polluting. And so they turn around and say stuff like, we need to get a control on overpopulation because there's too many of these people weighing us down. You then get phrases like useless eaters. You get weird international policies such as you will own nothing and you will be happy. And ultimately that means, Ian, you will not get your cold fusion and your spaceships, because in the event that there's an energy revolution on par with like this level of fusion energy, which is insane, that would mean a massive and explosive population boom.
That's for sure.
And there's a lot of powerful people who don't want that to happen.
You think with how expensive college is, we'd be seeing some more of these technological advancements. We wouldn't be seeing train derailments in East Palestine with how much Americans are paying for college. But we're not.
But the other thing is, like, college is a business, right? Like, yeah. I don't even know that all degrees are equal. I think there are programs that are probably great, but generally people are paying to have their certificate. They are not actually always advancing to the level that we'd like them to see, or that would be implied by the fact that you went to college. A lot of people are in debt, basically having graduated by the skin of their teeth and having learned nothing. I mean, there are colleges that closed during COVID because the enrollment is so low and because ultimately the business of college is failing.
Small Rabbit Monkey said, yes, you will, Ian. Don't listen to Tim. So I'm going to see that cold fusion. Thanks, Small Rabbit
No,
Monkey.
I think we will, but I think there's powerful individuals who are trying to reduce population.
And they have a reasonable fear, because if every human had access to unlimited energy, Timothy McVeigh, what else would he have blown up? Like a psycho terrorist that had a horrible childhood, just beat, that hates humanity, has access to unlimited power. Like that's severely dangerous. So I understand why, but there's scales. I don't want to give everyone cold fusion packs just yet, but hydrogen fuel, it's lightweight and could be cheaper than gasoline.
I'm thinking about what is about to hit the economy, and perhaps the only solution is going to be student loan debt forgiveness in some capacity. It was easy to say when we were talking about 24 and 25-year-olds up to maybe like early 30s that we don't want to forgive student loans. These older people have all paid them back. It's like, look, these people hate why it's not fair. There's a lot of questions about fairness, about making the working class pay the bills of the highest income earners. But I think there is a harsh reality to whatever your opinion is. You're presented with two parent factions or parent paths to take. One, we do not bail out the people who have student loan debt. And then these people who are in their mid to late 30s and 40s, don't have families, don't have kids, don't buy property, become angry and purposeless and violent. Or we do bail them out, and the people who are supposed to be the crux of the economy resume working, have the load taken off their backs, and it stabilizes things a little bit. It's a question about the 2008 crisis when they bailed out the banks. Do you let the economy just course correct, shock everybody? There's going to be large amounts of death because of this, because of the economic crisis. Or do you bail out, alleviate some of the crisis, extend it for a little longer, but reduce the amount of death? It's serious questions. I think that the reasonable approach that the government will likely want to take is going to be a bailout, whether Joe Biden wants to or not. And in fact, you may see this in 2024, Joe Biden coming out and saying, one of the biggest drags on our economy right now is student loan debt, and you all know it. Each and every one of you that has settled the debt that you can't pay back as you're living paycheck to paycheck, we will get it done. We will pass the bill, blah, blah, blah. You got to vote for Democrat, down ticket. What's Trump going to say?
Well, you look at what they're doing. So if I owe Joe Biden 10 grand in debt, he's like, you can't pay that back. So what I'm going to do is print money and then take it from you and pay me back sooner. Right. And I'm like, dude, you can't force me to pay you back, Joe Biden. And no, let me pay you back at my pace, which is a zero, because I have no interest in paying it back.
But I think the libertarian response is going to be let the system crumble. Just let it fall apart, and then we'll just restart from where we are.
All about with putting the default on the loaners. Whoever loaned the money, you're not getting it back. I'm not all about printing up money to pay back those loaners.
But the problem is the loaner is the government.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to take the default. I mean, what's the point anyway? It's like $1 trillion. What's the difference?
I mean, I would love to have one presidential candidate say, when I'm in office, I'm going to stop issuing student loans, right? Because the system is broken. We can see it. We haven't dealt with the fallout yet. But no one is saying that. Like, why can't we just stop a terrible program from existing?
I gotta read this super chat from Sumner. What does it say? Sumner Robinson. Mm-hmm. Citibank has a total of 14 trillion? No, 14 billion.
15 basically.
About 15 billion. I was like, the trillion doesn't make sense. Oh no, okay, I see right here. 15 billion shorting the Nasdaq and 7 billion shorting the S&P. Bank of America has 23 billion shorting the Nasdaq and 18 billion shorting the S&P. Reminds me of The Big Short, when the guys who bet against the housing market were wondering why their credit default swaps were stable as delinquencies were skyrocketing and the mortgages were becoming worthless. It's because the banks were lying about what was going on so they could offload their exposure to unsuspecting smaller banks and lenders or individuals. So they would go and say, hey, this is worth a lot of money, you should buy it. Then they would. Then as soon as they offloaded all their debt, they went, market's exploding, have a nice day. And nobody goes to jail for it.
And at the end of The Big Short, remember they said, they had a little joke. How you're like, oh, we totally held people accountable. Just kidding. No, we didn't. So my question to you guys is, regarding the current situation, the current economy and student loans, should anyone be arrested? And if so, who? Should people be held accountable? What should happen? I know you guys kind of started talking about it with the defaulters. Or
I don't know about arrest, but what I will say is, if you actually want to solve a problem, you first identify what's causing the problem. And I don't see that part. I see people are going straight to the problem and trying to band-aid it, but ultimately they're not stopping, the bleeding from the wound. The biggest issue that I see is that the federal government is trying to play manufacturing middle class, right? So that's why they're throwing all this money. Anybody can get a student loan. That's when you start seeing for-profit colleges that don't care about anything. Whereas our parents' days, they got accepted into school. That was the only way you got a college education, right? So they had some sort of merit base. And then on top of that, they had to find some sort of way to get a loan. But back then it was reasonable. Now it's become an entire economy on its own based off of cheap money from the government. Because it's no regard, they'll just give it to anybody. That's part of the problem. Same thing with the 2008 crash. Ultimately, it stemmed from the federal government trying to manufacture the middle class by saying the American dream is to own a home, so we're going to make it easier for everybody. And what did they do? They messed up the market, and they incentivized chaos. And that's what we're seeing with the student loan market. And they're not going to punish the people who are actually abusing it, right? The colleges, no one's talking about the colleges. Everything's about what's Joe Biden going to do. No one's ever talked about the colleges. No one ever talks about the endowment, right? No one
Will
ever.
Chamberlain does.
What is the
Seize the endowments.
What's the endowment? Yeah, I hear that. Seize the endowments. What is the endowment exactly?
It's basically how much money they just got sitting in reserves, right? So,
Given just
Money that's been left to them or given to them.
yeah.
okay, tax-free stuff. People are donating.
People are
it.
donating, getting a tax credit, and then
Yeah.
that generates money off of it.
Does
which
the
is what
government
they
give
pay
them endowment money as well?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so. But even from the fact that, let's say you have a college that has, $500 million. I don't know. I'm just making up a number, but they're still charging your kid $20,000 a semester, right? Does that seem like it makes a whole lot of sense? Why is it so expensive? I'm not saying it should be free, but why is it so expensive? And on top of that, I was talking to Shane Cashman. He was an adjunct professor. They don't pay anything for these people, and they hire a whole bunch of adjunct professors. So I mean,
It's a scam.
It's one big scam. And now they're saying, let's bail out everybody, keep the system in place. And guess what? In 10 to 15 years, we'll be back at the same point.
Yeah, it seems like the college system is decrepit at this point, and that you can educate yourself online and learn faster, more readily, and from home.
Are the salaries of the presidents of colleges public, generally speaking? I don't
think
know
so.
off the top of my head.
I
I'd be
think it's
so
if it's a
curious
public
to
school.
see how much money the upper management is making at these schools, because I had no idea about the adjunct professor thing.
$2 million
That's
Yale.
crazy.
Yeah.
The president of Yale makes $1.9 million a year.
That's
And
more than I
remember,
thought.
there's like the adjunct professors, but then they hire crazy administrative blow, right? There was a administrator and a sub-administrator and someone who helps with the paperwork and whatever else, all the way down. So if the point of the institution is to have, professors that are researching and studying things, that they're good educators, why are they not the priority? Why do we have 85 administrators for every one professor? That's not the actual statistic. I'm making that up.
But they're never incentivized to cut the fat,
Yeah.
right? They operate very similar to how the government operates. They create a job and that job never goes away, right? So if the government said, we will only give money, but only up to a certain amount, and they started doing that wide scale, they'd have no choice but to cut the costs. Otherwise, they have no customer, right? So then what do? They start cutting the fat. We can't have 5 administrators for this task. We have to reduce it because we can't afford this if we're going to keep everybody making about the same amount. So we have to start cutting the fat. No one ever does that when it comes to college debt. They always say, what's the federal government going to do for us? They're the ones who screwed this all up in the first place.
And that's by giving unlimited loans.
Yeah. I mean, quite literally.
But you can't
just about-
default on it.
You can't default on it, but anybody can get it.
Were they like trying to catch up with the colleges raising costs, so they would give more loan? They'd be like, "Oh, we'll cover it. We'll cover it."
I've always heard the inverse, that colleges raise costs because basically they were guaranteed that you would be able to pay tuition. Instead of being like, well, what can the average family or the average individual reasonably pay to attend our school? They were like, well, you just take out a loan, right? Like even now, I don't know if your son will end up, if he's not applied to college yet, right?
No.
Okay, so some colleges will send you like the acceptance letter. I remember this happening to me, and they'll be like, congratulations, you got a scholarship. That's so exciting. Except half of your scholarship is a loan. So they're presenting it to you like, wow, we really want you to come here, but actually what they want is for you to take out a loan to go there, which is what everyone wants you to do anyways. That's also what the federal government wants you to do. One time we talked about on the show, like, I don't advocate that you give to your university, but if you were to, why can't you give directly to a student who is trying to pay off their student loans? Why can't you cover a portion of tuition instead of it going into a pool where then the 800 administrators that they have decide who gets it later? Why can't you have a more direct contact with the student? Because again, ultimately a lot of the money goes into the endowment, which never really reaches the people who need it, like the program heads, like the adjunct professors, like the students.
Well, back to what Tim said, it's a scam.
Uh-huh.
It's not really about the students, right? They give them a superficial product to make them feel like they're learning, right? We go and take these useless classes to make us feel like we're being educated, right? But they leave, and I've talked to so many college graduates where I'm like, I don't know what I learned, right? So you spent 4 years in college, you came out learning what? But you owe all this money. You got scammed, son. Like, I don't know any other way to put it.
What if we had like a Patreon thing for online college? I know Jordan Peterson's working on setting up an online college, and there's like Phoenix University, which was kind of a predecessor. I don't know how that works exactly, but like if you could watch the individual students learning and you're like, I love that guy. I love how fast he's learning. I want to give him $10 a month. Just like that for a cup of coffee a day, you can.
But like, not the students, the professors.
Oh
So-
yeah, and you can fund the professors too. That'd be awesome.
But that's how you do it. So what you do is you create an online university that gets accredited, that issues degrees, and then you say, here are all the professors and all the subjects we have available. And when you enroll in one of these classes, you are paying monthly to that professor. The professor, like 5% goes to the university, or 10, like whatever, like probably 10% makes sense because there's like transactional fees and then server fees. But it's basically a Patreon for education.
Yeah.
And then when you complete the course, you'll get a degree from the university.
But for me, who's not even at the school, I just get to watch them learn online, the kids, and they don't have money, some of them. So I want to fund them to go to college. Like I'm like in my 40s. I'm done with that shit. I just got money lying around. I want to fund. I'm just saying, I personally am not in that state yet, but there's always something to do with your money. But I would like to help fund kids without making them take loans out.
well, those are called scholarships.
Yeah, so it'd be like a proactive scholarship where, like you're saying, you can give money like an endowment directly to the student.
Yeah, I wish there was
A
more
scholarship.
Yeah, that isn't administrated by the university that's going to serve.
Right, where
Yeah, but
I get to
they're
pick,
private scholarships. There's tons of them.
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you get to pick who gets it.
Yeah, there's like private, there's nonprofits
Grants.
and foundations and grants, and there are foundations that will be like, we give a grant to Asian Americans who
Yeah.
are low income and want to go to college, and then they contact the institution, they fill out paperwork, and they say, write us an essay on why we should give you the money, and if you get approved, we pay for your college.
Yeah, but I
Build
guess
this-
I would like to cut out the middleman where it's like if I had money, I could give it directly to a student at a school that
Tax-free.
you know what I mean? Instead of it going to an administrator at a nonprofit or at a school who then decides who gets it later.
Build the technology, call it the scholarship.
It'd be interesting. I mean, one of the challenges is that education is great, and I think people feel starved for that in a way, and I wish we had more decentralized way. I mean, YouTube is the great example, right? Everyone always says you can look up anything on YouTube. You can learn so much, and that's amazing. I wish that like it would be cool if cities had like more. I mean, public libraries do this and stuff. It's just we default to thinking the university is what's providing the lecturers or the things that you can go to just to learn, and I think that's where we kind of get this like shopping mall effect with universities. We think that's sort of where you go, like after you finish high school, you go there and you get all the skills you need, and then you leave, and it's all kind of centrally located. But really, you know, if you're actively interested in a subject, you have to be more proactive. The university isn't going to really educate you on a lot of things, especially, we've talked about this before, when you come out of high school not knowing how to pay your taxes and things like that. Like there are skills that you just continue to put off, and then finally you're like 22, 23 getting out of college, and maybe you learn something, but also you don't have any practical skills.
Right. And I think part of the problem, I think, is Americans have caved into thinking that education is institutionalized. Like that's the only way that you can learn. So this means the only way you can learn is by going to a public school. The only way that you can have a real education if you go to a college or a university. That's the only way. Outside of that, you're part of the what? Non-educated class, right? Meanwhile, these people who spend God knows how much money, spend how many years within school, come out knowing nothing and making less. And like everything is the inverse, and it doesn't make any sense. I think we are starting to get back, and I'm trying to do this as a parent, to tell my son that intellect is not necessarily what the teacher puts on your grade. Intellect is far more than that. Intellect is about learning on your own, being curious, going out in the world, experiencing things, having a job, dealing with people, right? And how you react to the world around you in that way. Like, for example, I'm a writer today. I didn't go to school for writing. I figured that out. I figured out how to do all these things by myself. No one had to teach me. I just asked questions. I analyze things. All that takes intellect. All that takes curiosity. But someone would say, I'm not a real writer because I didn't go to school to get this degree. I don't need all that. I don't have a college degree at all. And some people are surprised by that because they think that I'm very intellectual in some regard.
Credentialism.
It's credentialism.
They think that if you don't have a high school diploma, you must be stupid.
Right. Exactly.
And then they wonder why they're broke and in debt. And there's the pro athletes, tons of pro athletes, especially in skateboarding. Easy example, tons of them quit high school to go pro at skateboarding, and now they're millionaires.
Right.
Not all of them, but they're the college graduate. Was it PhD billionaires typically have less than college dropout billionaires? Yeah. And then you look at like Mark Zuckerberg, and I think even Bill Gates too, right?
Dropped out.
No, actually, no. Bill Gates maybe not. I'm not sure. It was Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was a college dropout.
I barely graduated high school. I didn't even walk with my class.
Wow.
And
yeah, I just stopped going.
I almost dropped out
At 14.
of college. I was very close. I was like 3.5 years in, and I was so done with it. It was just like, what is the point of this? They're going to give me some paperwork that no one's going to ever look at anyway. And the whole idea when I was going in was like, well, once you get that degree, it's going to help you get the job, like the temp job where I'm typing on a computer that I don't want to be doing anyway.
right.
And they never asked. I would put it on my resume. No one ever asked. For 15 years, no one even mentioned a college degree. They're like, what's your work experience? That's all they cared about.
There's a story on Fortune that says that Bill Gates dropped out of high school during his sophomore year, but then ultimately did attend Harvard. So I don't know where he falls into this spectrum, but kind of interesting.
Well, I love that you point out the difference between intelligence and knowledge. They're completely different. You can be brilliant and not know anything.
And wisdom.
Yeah, for sure. Wisdom.
Intelligence, knowledge,
Experience.
all very different things.
Like knowledge is the
Experience,
stuff that you learn, and that can be learned in lots of different ways.
And there are I know some dumb people who know a lot.
Exactly. And there's some brilliant people that don't know anything because they just weren't around the information to learn it.
Like I've met some dumb people in my days who can like cite tons of information from books, like encyclopedic, like in knowledge, but they can't put two and two together.
Those people are dangerous when they get into positions of power.
Yeah, they can tell you like who the 17th president was when they got inaugurated, and they have all this knowledge, and they can't explain the basics of like a logical problem or anything like that. But and then I know people who are really, really fast, can solve any problem. You give them a Rubik's Cube, and they're like, oh, I can figure this out real quick. And you're like, wow, that's an intelligent person. And then there are people who are wise, and they say knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Yeah, the application of knowledge.
You're right. And intelligence being different, because you can say intelligence is your comprehensive abilities, not your understanding of application of knowledge necessarily. Like someone who's intelligent can solve a puzzle very, very quickly, but might put a tomato in a fruit salad because they've not yet experienced it and don't understand.
And someone that's wise might be like, I don't have the time for this right now because I've got some other things that are more important.
Yeah, I always felt like school was about how much you can remember.
Yep.
And put down on the test.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly what it was.
And I read this really great article that said college, no one should go to college unless you're IQ tested at 110 or above. Old articles, probably from 20 years ago. And the argument was that schools are basically memory centers. They try to get you to remember things, but they don't teach you what the things mean. So what ends up happening is young people will gain knowledge without understanding. They'll then jumble these ideas up in their minds in confusing ways because they know things, but they don't understand things. Then they go to college and experience the same thing, where many of these ideas are beyond the average person, but we're trying to get average people to go to colleges. You end up with people saddled with debt and unhappy and not able to find work.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that being said, we'll go to Super Chats. Before we get started with the Super Chats, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, head over to timcast.com, click join us, become a member. Members only shows coming up in about a half an hour. It's going to be fun, uncensored. We got a story about communists and Elon Musk. We'll talk about it. And also the Timcast app is now available for download in the Google Play Store. So go download it. Even if you don't want to listen to the show through the app or whatever, because you like watching live on YouTube, the app still has articles and a bunch of other cool stuff. So you should download it and check it out. We're really excited. It will be up on Apple shortly. It is still going through the review process. But also, you can get the tickets for the Timcast Miami event. Let's read. I'm not your buddy guy says, dude kind of looks like Kanye.
Since the beginning of the show, they've been saying
Everyone's
that.
saying
Oh
Yeah.
my God, I knew it. So just so you know, I recently lost 60 pounds.
Oh,
Well, I'm at 59 pounds, technically.
we can round up. It's cool.
Yeah. So when I first started marketing myself, everybody said chubby Kanye. And so I freaking knew it that someone was going to say that. I was waiting for it.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
The thumbnail looks a lot like, yeah, it's awesome.
Waffle Sensei says, is faster than I'm not your buddy. You tried, but you didn't get it. Sorry. All right. Noah Sanders says, hate that I'm going to miss the show tonight. I'll be busy working in my truck. Just want to shout out the Discord community and the Miami show we're all psyched for. Y'all have a blessed night.
Thanks, Noah.
Yeah, we're actually potentially planning some kind of VIP event because we're talking about like an elite members thing, but we might open it up to non-elite members. We're trying to figure it out. I don't want to say too much until I can finalize everything with the people actually doing the work to organize it, because I could just, they'll get all angry if I'm like telling people things that we haven't finalized yet. But we want to do like some kind of VIP scenario. So we want to do an elite members meetup and then some kind of VIP thing, but we'll figure it out. Bonk Bonk says, we need a cast brew coffee house in Herkimer County, New York. Lots of based people here, and it's the birthplace of Remington Arms. Keep up the good work. Cool. Yeah, we just got to figure out how to start the franchise. I mean, the first thing is we have to get the first location open, and hopefully that will be within the next 2 months, maybe 3 months. It was supposed to be earlier in the year, but the issue is our building is a historic building, and we're trying to, like, you got to respect a historic building. We have like an elevator from like the 1900s, like one of the first elevators ever put in a building. So it's super old, and that gives us issues.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
But we're not allowed to let the public go on it.
It is cool that people want to franchise a business that isn't open yet.
Yeah, I know.
I think that's a good, I don't know, a good sign for the community.
There's no reason you have to have a brick and mortar there to start franchising.
No, I think Subway didn't have one, but I'm not doing this because it's like, oh boy, here's an opportunity to get people to sell it, like to buy something. No, we want to have a coffee house. Mm-hmm. We want to start doing it and then be like, okay, who else wants to do it? I don't want to just, and it feels weird. I'm not interested. But I am excited by the idea. I think we have so much interest. It's entirely possible that within like 2 years, there could be 100 locations.
Yeah. That's
all
what it sounds
independently
like.
owned and operated. And I'm thinking about the Chick-fil-A method of like, you can only own one location, because I don't want some corporation with investors to be like, let's purchase 50 locations. And then you get this weird corporate machine. I don't like that. You know, I want it to be like a individually owned and operated small business, but the brand lends people like benefits. Yeah. That people will find it on Google Maps easier. They'll search the website and find your location. You'll get, methodologies sent by us and assistants and things like that. I want it to be more community stuff.
That's cool.
Hopefully. But we are looking to hire someone now to begin the process of creating the system before we even launch. And then it's possible that before it opens, we could even have people getting the ball rolling on opening their location.
Where can people reach out if they're interested to get involved with
I have no idea.
Brew? Okay.
Yep.
I've seen a few chats over the last couple of weeks asking about the coffee thing. I never know what to say.
Maybe they should follow the Cast Brew Coffee Twitter. Maybe
brilliant
that's where
idea.
you have updates.
Yes. Follow. What's the Twitter account? Cast Brew Coffee?
I think it's Cast Brew Coffee. I'll double check right now.
And if anybody wants to hit me in Slack with the data of where people can contact, if they want to sign up to work with Cast Brew Coffee, let me know, because
It is at Cast Brew Coffee on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Follow them, and they're the ones running everything, and so they can give you more information.
Also, if you go to castbrew.com, there's a contact button at the top.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Well, look at that.
It's like it's a real business.
Yeah. We're branching out. We're expanding, all right? We'll grab some more super chats. What do we got? Bocephus says, I'm still thinking of moving to New Hampshire, but then the Republican Scanlon is trying to get Trump off the ballot. And to quote Tim, Florida has apocalyptic weather. Where's my freedom and liberty? Yeah, and I'll tell you this, the thing about West Virginia is it's really great. But man, it's got red tape. Mm-hmm. West Virginia's got red tape. Oof, understatement.
Yeah.
There's not
We're in it for the people, not the government, I guess.
But it's the takeover. It's the people here are pushing back. And it's really exciting. I mean, the people up in Martinsburg who have been coming and talking to us, who are super excited for the projects we're doing. This is going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got some really cool stuff happening up in Martinsburg, and I hope to see y'all there. It's a good opportunity. A lot of generational businesses, man.
Yeah.
Number 1 fastest growing city in West Virginia, Martinsburg.
No, for real?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
And Winchester, which is just south, is one of the fastest. I think it is the fastest growing city in Virginia.
I didn't know that one.
Wow.
That was at least a year ago when I read that article. But yeah,
Well, the concern.
I love it here, so don't come and buy up all the housing.
Well,
I'm just
we
kidding,
want people
obviously.
because the concern that I'm hearing is that woke people are starting to come in.
Yep.
And that they're disrupting the local laws, they're disrupting the culture, and they're acting like they're the victims when it happens.
Yeah.
They're like weird stuff going on with like that. Martinsburg had a drag show for kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is this happening in West Virginia and Berkeley County? Well, it's because the people who live here don't understand what's going on, and we need people to come and help reinforce that culture and be like, no, we're not going to do that here. All right, we'll read some more. Let's grab another super chat. Gitch says, there's a video floating around of employees of an Ace Hardware in Seattle threatening customers with a bat, and then eventually a fight broke out, all because the customers didn't want to wear a mask.
Wow.
I think it's an old video, though, isn't it?
I haven't seen it floating around.
I
think
saw
it's
the
probably
video.
Old.
Yeah, I saw the video. I can't verify if that's actually.
I think it's old.
Yeah, that happens often. Oh, sorry.
All right, let's grab another super chat. Zachary Rossfeld says, I know you don't read these, but Joe Biggs isn't given those years to scare others. They want Proud Boys angry. Think about what they'll do next. Perhaps that's it. Perhaps what they're trying to do is incite a violent reaction so they can justify heavy-handed violence against Trump supporters. That's why I keep saying, like, make money, protect your family. And here's the really, really simple thing. Here's the really simple thing. Do not do what Joe Biggs did. You know why? They separated him from his daughter. And they are laughing as they do it.
Yeah.
Don't let them take you from your kids so that they can bring your kid to some adult drag, some kid drag show or something. Because this is their goal, to take fathers away from the family, to break up families. So right now what needs to happen is ballot harvesting and politics. Imagine this. The Democrats are wiggling their fingers in your face saying, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. And the moment you do anything, the cops jump in and arrest you. But if you stand there and smile smugly and say, I think you're doing this because you know you're going to lose next year, and they're going to start crying. You just got to make sure that everyone is handling things peacefully. Peacefully. That's the way to do it, because I think Trump has a really strong chance to win. Now, of course, we have some paper chats, well, I'll probably get to in a second, where people are like, yes, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Heron Gaming News says, Tim, can you please add Cast Brew Coffee, CBC, I like that, to the links in the description. Also, I'm trying Rise with Roberto Jr. this time. Rip Roberto. Roberto Jr. Roberto's still out there. He's doing his Roberto thing. We got to keep him separate from the ladies, though, because a lot of them are his daughters, and we do not want him, banging his daughters. So he's got his own little house. But we have identified Roberto III. Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah, he's got a white body, but he's got the Roberto head and tail, and so he's Roberto III.
How many boys were there in the end to choose from?
I think Roberto Jr. had 3 sons.
Wow.
So there's one who looks really cool. Roberto Jr. apparently knocked up one of the Jersey Giants, I guess, who then had a kid, and it's like, yeah, it's gonna be big. It's gonna be very, very big.
That's
Big
crazy.
rooster. Yeah, they can get super big.
Yeah, for those who don't know, as you can probably guess by the name, Jersey Giants are large chickens. They are, I mean, you have to use like 2 arms to hold
very
it.
big.
They're very big.
Well, I mean, the ones we have aren't that big.
Even compared to the other ones, though?
They're big.
Yeah,
They're
they
big
definitely
chickens.
stand out.
As an aside on Cast Brew, is there any plans to start selling merch? Because I want a Cast Brew coffee mug, and I've wanted one for all the commercials that I've been working on too.
You should
Yes.
tweet at Casper Coffee and ask them.
I did. I mentioned it to Sarah before. I'm going to push that forward.
Yeah. All of these things are available now.
Headbands. Oh, do we have merch on the web? It's not on the website.
And
yet.
we're really, really excited because political season kicking off means that they've already started their psychotic ad buys. And so I just love it. When we had Michael Bloomberg advertising on my channel, he was advertising on my channels, and it's like my ad revenue's through the roof, and people are commenting on the video like, this video where you insult Michael Bloomberg was sponsored by Michael Bloomberg. And I'm like, that's great.
Thank you,
I mean,
Michael Bloomberg.
No, but look, like he wants to be in front of these videos that'll exist no matter what. If he doesn't advertise, my video comes out either way. So in his mind, he's like, I got to get a commercial on that video to give a positive message before the negative one. And so he ends up paying me to actually make the negative one inadvertently. I love it. I'm excited for all the Democrat and Republican ads that will appear on all of our channels, which we will use to engage in culture building.
Did you know that Bloomberg was doing multi-language ad buys?
Really?
My
We
old
got to make the
job.
Spanish language, Timcast Español.
Oh my God. My old job,
Seriously.
I worked with like 98% Hispanic people. And I went into one of the offices and they're listening to a Spanish radio station. And then all of a sudden I hear, Michael Bloomberg. And I was like, he's taking out ad buys.
Covering all his bases.
Like, yeah, he was just flooding the market with money.
I wonder if we can get AI to do a
To
translation.
do a dubbing. I want to take the
Yeah.
commercial that we did and dub it and have it in Spanish. It's so
I mean,
funny.
it'll be really cool when we get to the point where the voice to text translation is better. I do not believe voice to text can accurately transcribe this whole show. I did a video talking about Florida, and I said Ron DeSantis, and the caption said Rhonda Santos, and I'm like, is that where that came from? Where they were calling him Rhonda or whatever?
I've been calling him Rhonda since the beginning. I'm like, who's this Rhonda guy?
Rhonda Santos. So it's like, yeah, we're not quite there, but it would be really, really cool.
Sounds like a Cuban neighbor in Florida.
I mean, if you think about it, we're really close. We've already had this for 10 years with Google Glass, where you could say, okay, Google Translate. Oh, I just triggered everyone's devices. But then someone would speak, and then you'd see what they said, and it would speak it to you. But there's still a delay between they speak, process, you hear. We're getting really close to the idea of a universal translator, where you're wearing a headphone and you just hear your native language as they speak their native
My
language.
Google just tried to translate what you were saying, dude. Talk about when he's like, initiate order 51. Like, dude, someone could come on a TV show and say, Alexa, play Fountains of Wayne. Sorry, guys, it's a great band.
I got one.
And what's wrong? It's still legal for me to do that. Google. Okay, Google.
No.
Like, how
Wait,
disruptive is that?
Stop. Ian, you're ruining it. Shh. Okay, Google, remind me Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Timcast IRL.
Boom.
Did it work?
Done.
It did it?
I think so.
There you go, everybody.
working
Now
right
you'll never
now.
forget.
Isn't that insidious, though, how that could be manipulated? Like, these AIs are getting more and more powerful. The commands they can receive, like, maybe they should be
Yes,
only know your
technology
voice.
is terrifying, and I don't like
That
it.
you can do it over the internet.
People
onto
are
someone
saying
else.
it worked. They're saying their
Really?
phones are turning on.
All right, well, what you really want to hear is...
Here's one. Wait. Alexa, remind me Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Watch Timcast IRL.
Oh my God, my wife is freaking out.
I wonder if our viewers, people are like, I can't. It's who does Walls? That band. Who did?
What?
I'll figure it out.
What?
It's a band that I'm going to tell everyone's Alexa to play.
Everyone's calling you Kanye.
Yes.
I saw Kanye East, and I thought that was really funny.
Oh,
That's a good one. Henry back to play says, ask Amazon's, I'm not going to say the name, but you get it.
Do
The
it.
lady who will win the 2024 election. Why? Does it say something funny?
Dun, dun, dun.
We don't have one. I think we have one. We just
Chris
unplugged
Berman
it.
is sending stop setting off my Alexa.
Isn't
Just
that
said it
nuts,
again.
dude?
You said.
Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to say it.
So it's basically change your machine's
I thought you had
name.
to like greet it. It'd be like,
Nope, not with that
no,
one.
okay. I don't have one, and I like have refuses to work in offices that have them in the past. Like, it
It's
really
almost-
freaks me out.
It's almost like the word Alexa is a password, and you should change that word so your machine responds
Well,
to a
not.
different
Don't
term.
have
No,
them.
for real. You can actually
Rid of them.
have it respond to computer.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Make
so-
your own weird words so that people can't trigger it.
I don't
from
think so.
far.
I think
consider
it
getting
has
rid of
three
it.
words. I think it has its name, computer, and like one other thing.
No, you can name
no.
it anything. Yeah, in the Alexa app, you can name
You can
the
make the wake.
device.
I thought we weren't supposed
I
to
know,
say
but
it
you can
now.
make
Anyway.
the wake. I'm pretty sure the wake command is.
It can be anything.
I'm not so sure.
For
Are you sure?
Alexa, I've done it. You can do anything, any name you type in there. But it works best on the first name, the original, because how many people have said the name and have talked to the machine as all this data.
Yeah,
we got to get Casper Coffee on Amazon so that we can, we can say
Yeah, we can
device by Casper Coffee.
drop
Ale-
some ads during.
Alexa, play Walls by Kings of Leon.
No, come
It's
on.
the best album, dude. It's one of the best albums of the day right
Yeah,
now.
but now people are going to be trying to listen
All
to
right,
the
you guys,
show.
I'm not going to do that anymore.
All right, we'll
That
grab
is
some
really-
more. Here we go. What do we got here? The SIG P220 says, the SCOTUS can issue a writ of mandamus. The U.S. Marshal Service enforces their ruling. Will they? Not with the threat of packing. America, the idea, died with Reconstruction. Civil war is a power grab. Interesting. Admar says, with Biggs' sentence, I got the same pit in my stomach as when I read about Ross Ulbricht and his sentence. Hit harder having a 1-year-old daughter.
Yeah, both of the men, Reels and Biggs, have young children, and I think that's just incredibly sad. Also, I think Biggs' daughter is living with his, from what I know, very ill mother. So he's a male support system that's been completely removed from that family.
We have another Cast Brew commercial coming out soon.
Oh yeah, I saw it today.
And they're all going to be, each commercial is going to be part of what can effectively be turned into a movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like with portals. I was thinking
that-
my guy could travel through like dimensions or something.
Well, I don't think we need to do that. The arc so far is just that Ian is an acolyte of Roberto, and that's it. And he's trying to trick people into drinking the coffee, which converts them.
You'll love the new one.
Yeah.
The special effects are fantastic.
All right. We'll grab another one. Matt Speak says, question for the group. If Trump wins, will Kamala certify the election? Nope.
But
Nope.
it's okay when she doesn't do it, you
Right.
know?
Of course. She's going to be like, I'm not reading this. And then that's it. And then they're going to be like, oh, insurrection. And Democrats are going to be like, yeah, but who cares? We're the only ones who actually abuse law enforcement. And Republicans are going to be like, well, I guess you're right. Okay, back to the way things were. Sure.
I just imagine she would not certify it as she's cackling at the same
Yeah.
time. Certify it.
We did it, Joe. We did it.
We did it. It was a debate.
Auntie C says the U.S. is described in Ezekiel 16:49-50. If those verses don't describe the state of our nation, nothing does. God help us. Okay, well, let me. What did they say was it? Let me pull this up. Ezekiel 16:49. And what is this? What is this a reference to? It's probably something gross, huh? Let's see. Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. Yep. You know, there's going to be like a New Testament later on, and it's just like the nation of the United States was full of fat, lazy people who didn't care for responsibility, and their culture burned to the ground.
Dude, it's the fentanyl thing, man, and they're lacing fentanyl with this drug that the DEA is attempting to put on a Schedule 1, the stuff they're lacing with, and they're moving marijuana. This went through Biden proposed it to Department of Health and Human Services, who accepted it, who sent it to the DEA to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So it can now become researched.
Yeah.
And they were talking, Matt Gaetz and the head of the DEA were going back and forth about how horrific the opioid crisis is. These synthetic opiates are called opioids, and that marijuana can help people get off of it. They can help their withdrawals. They can help the pain and stuff.
They've
And
known this for so long, though.
Yeah, but we're finally moving it. Like, we got a president that's like, man, Hunter smokes so much. I was thinking of Biden talking about Hunter. Like, dude, he smokes so much of that junk anyway.
All right. Jeremy B says, Hannah Claire, please assume the two-handed Tiffany Gomez pose and say that MFer is not real.
I don't know what the direction she's pointing is.
You
It's like,
the other way,
it's like
right?
in two directions.
I did not think about this when I got dressed this morning at all.
I just wrote down.
You can no woman could ever wear that shirt ever again.
I know. I also put my hair up. It was down earlier
Serious
today.
Gomez vibes, dude.
Oh my
Gomez
gosh!
vibes.
I didn't realize what an influencer she was. Maybe she is a fashion airline, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the
Iconic.
that's the note that you guys saw at the beginning of the show. I was letting Hannah Claire know what
Did you see?
guys were
You guys see
saying.
the painting that I got?
No.
The painting where she's pointing at the plane and everyone in the seats
yeah.
are fictional people.
Oh, you got it?
Did you
Yeah,
did it
that's
arrive? I remember.
Yeah,
when
it's
you ordered-
downstairs.
That's
I don't know where they
amazing.
put it, but it's like Bigfoot's in the back, and then there's like a jackalope and Avril Lavigne. Santa
It's
Claus.
awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Michael McCord says, graduated in 08 with 3 degrees, comp sci, math, and theater. Took a minimum of 21 plus hours worth of courses per semester plus summer courses. Graduated in 4.5 years with 3.75 GPA while working 2 jobs and in a show every semester. But they get free money.
Dude, that's badass, man. That's a nice resume. Tell me you're doing
Yeah.
something amazing with your life right now.
I hope.
Yeah, you got the drive.
Congrats on all your hard work. That's awesome. I'm sorry that the government is so bad at this.
Copper Lobo says, Tim, I've told you time and time again, the plan is to agitate the right. They want civil unrest so they can use it as a tool to abolish 2A. Once 2A is gone, our freedom is gone forever. I think it's a bit more, it's not so direct as 2A. The general idea is the only legitimacy they have is when they respond to violence. If nobody gets violence, they'll have to fake it. But nobody should get violent. All right. A. Merrick says, Hawaii proved malice was right. Cops will follow any order up to and including murdering children. Yep. That's right. Crazy stories about kids still in the cars when the cars burned. People don't understand, because we had a guy call in, a member who's a firefighter, and he says when the winds are 80 miles an hour and the fire is blowing past you and you're burning and you can't breathe, you go down. And so for the people that were trapped in their cars, the fire swept in so quickly, many of them didn't make it out. And those cops held them there. That's it. Gitch says abortion is unconstitutional because it violates the baby's Fourth Amendment rights. I think you meant 14th. Because I don't think they're searching the baby. They're technically seizing the baby. But the 14th Amendment is interesting because it defines that no one can be denied human rights, but it also says being born in this country. But if those are two separate provisions, then you don't need to be born to be a citizen. There's other qualifications. All right. Jason Hutchinson says, we're not a nation of laws. We're a nation of political will. Quote, Steve Deese.
Bless you.
I couldn't do it. I tried to stop the sneeze. The sneeze came anyway. We'll grab some more. A good quote from Steve Deese.
Yeah, we're not bound by our laws. We're oathed to uphold them.
Dalamar says, we are a republic. How many times does this need to be said? Each state is an independent entity with its own laws. When did this stop being taught? Because we have a federal government and the Constitution guarantees your rights over the states. That means if you are in one state, they can't deny that you have inalienable rights at the federal level. So the 14th Amendment, for instance, you can't have Colorado determine what a human is and then Oklahoma determine what a human is, because then you have disagreements over who actually gets federal rights. The federal government has to enforce that, in which case the federal government says if a baby in the womb is a human and has 14th Amendment rights, you can't kill it. And that changes the law in other states.
Do you think there's any chance that all this abortion stuff's going to go back to the Supreme Court?
Yes. But
probably.
But there's no answer. The answer is supposed to be Congress, and Congress won't do anything about it because the Democrats just need a wedge issue, and Republicans don't have any real power right now. If the Republicans had the presidency, the Senate, and the House, I'd imagine they would have passed an abortion ban.
I don't think so. I think it's a wedge issue for both parties, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but the thing about the Republican Party is that the insurgents actually got in. With the Democrats, like Bernie Sanders, they were kept out. And then AOC is as establishment as they come, just masquerading as like a young leftist. But with the Republican Party actually has dissidents and people who are trying to vote for things. So it's possible that they went, oh, whoops, we can't do it. But this time, it's one thing in 2016 when you still had, like Paul Ryan and stuff. That I get. That nothing's going anywhere then. But if it were to happen now, I would not be surprised. I think it's more likely that you get an abortion ban at the congressional level.
I think once we have artificial wombs that are like totally functional in use, then they can outright ban abortion in the whole country. But we're so far away from that. I think that's one of the only things that comes to my mind when it's like, how do you solve this issue, and just be done with it? And artificial wombs comes to my mind.
To think that you could ban something that's been happening for hundreds of thousands of years is like, what an insane, in my opinion, insane proposition to ban it outright. But anyway, I don't want to take away from
but
the super chats.
banning doesn't mean it never happens. Like people have been smoking pot for eternity, and then the U.S. banned it, and it was almost entirely wiped out. People still did it, still existed, but for the most part, people did not.
Oh yeah, I should say there's no way to effectively ban it, in my opinion.
Right, just procedurally, and then criminally punish those who go against the law. All right. Think on this as you are all conflating an act against oneself versus an act against another. Gambling yourself. You go to get an abortion, you are acting against your child, who is a resident of said state. Ian, you are wrong. That is another human being. Well, so if we're talking about a baby at 8 months, then you have the problem of that baby does not need to be in the womb, right? The baby, what I mean to say is
it could survive outside.
It could survive outside
It should
the womb.
maybe stay for a little bit longer.
Right, until it is ready to be born. But what I mean to say is, if the baby can live outside, there's no reason to kill it.
Exactly.
So a woman fleeing to kill a baby that can survive on its own is murder.
Yeah.
Before that, there's a question of, did the woman invite the baby in? Was the baby placed there against the woman's will? Those are the questions I ask. Those are constitutional rights questions.
And that's why I found it interesting that Alabama had taken steps to sort of legally define to give a fetus a legal personhood status years before we even reached the Roe v. Wade or turnover.
8-month-old, like a 2-week-old baby after it's born, if you stop feeding it, you'd be charged with neglect, homicide. If it was 8-month-old and it's delivered but needs a machine to survive, but it's for profit, you got to pay money to a company to work the machine. Is it still neglect if you say, no, I don't want the machine?
I think at 8 months, the baby does not need a machine.
like a premature baby. If it's still
Yeah, like
if it's still like machine level premature.
I'm pretty sure, but so
So I just picked a random number, but if it still needs a machine, is it neglect to not use the machine and just let it die?
But I don't think you have that choice. If the baby's born premature, the hospital tries to save it. It's like saying, you brought a person with a gunshot wound to a hospital and said, "Don't help them." They'd be like, "Okay," and then they do it. Then they go help the person.
And then they charge the mother like cost for, "Hey, we had to do this with your baby. Now you owe us $40,000." And the mother's like, "I don't have any money," which was why I was getting the abortion in the first place. Like,
But like theoretically, the mother could be like, "I'm surrendering the rights to this child," and then the child would be awarded the state, which is complicated in its own right, but the child wouldn't die. That seems like the better option to me.
make little super soldiers.
I mean, that's the thing that's in place right now. It's the whole leave your baby in a basket at the fire department. Like, you can actually do that, and you're not going to be charged by any monetary amount, any crimes, and it relieves you of the child.
Here's a good one. The McGlone code says, "Ian, murder is banned, rape is banned, theft is banned, fraud is banned, and all have been happening since forever." Yep. People used to kill each other all the time. Then we were like, okay, now we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make that not okay. Technically, murder was always bad. It was just warring factions.
Yeah.
We're fine with it. But, fraud and a bunch of things that didn't used to be illegal are legal. Like fraud wasn't illegal back then. You could trick someone and they'd be like, well, buyer beware. Caveat emptor. Is that right? Caveat emptor?
Not sure.
Let the buyer beware.
Yeah, there's still like legal fraud, when you tell your buddy what stock's about to pop because you're in Congress or they work for the company that's about to pop the stock and then you make the bet. Like that's fraud, or that's like, I get your point though. That's a good point.
Ian,
that banning something can make it go away.
All right, everybody.
Or diminish.
We're going to start getting ready for that members only show. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show if you really do like it. It really, really does help. And head over to timcast.com, click join us because the members only show will be up on the front page or the app. Download now in the Google Play Store. Should be up in a few minutes. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Adam, you want to shout anything out?
Yeah, people can read my articles on Substack. Definitely go there, adambcoleman.substack.com, and check out wrongspeak.substack.com. And if you want to be heard, want to submit an article, definitely send it over.
Right on.
Nice. Well, I'm really looking forward to the after show with my friend Kanye East and me, Discount Plain Lady. If you could, it would be great if you could follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's my favorite news source, but I'm completely biased because I work there. Shane Cashman has a really cool story up about the Maine lobstering industry. And as you guys probably know by now, I am a Maine fangirl, so I highly recommend reading it. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Twitter at HCBrimo and on Instagram at hannahclaire.b. Thank you guys so much.
I'm at Ian Crosland on all social media, including X, where you can follow Adam at wrong_speak.
Thank you.
That's it, dog. And Kings of Leon, great band. Walls is the album. So I might have just been playing random songs off the album. Make sure you listen to it all the way through. Some of those, there's like 3 on there that are so freaking good. Real rock and roll, man. They don't twist it around with, not worried about being out of tune. It's just hardcore melodic rock. The dude's feeling it. Great album.
And you guys can follow me at Kellen PDL. We're going to jump over to the after show. If you don't know what that means, go to timcast.com and you can join the Discord and you will be with like-minded individuals. And if you go on the website, you can watch the show. And we get spicy. So come check it out.
All right, everybody. We will see you all over at timcast.com. Thanks for hanging out.